At first, this looks like just another post-apocalyptic story. One girl, one loyal companion, and an empty world. But don't let that fool you. This story isn't about surviving monsters. It's about surviving loneliness. Every day, she wanders through the ruins of civilization, searching for people who may no longer exist. And the deeper she explores this forgotten world, the more heartbreaking its secrets become. Trust me, this story is nothing like you're expecting. The story opens as a girl walks through a dimly lit room lined with old bookshelves and a tall wooden chest of drawers. A small watering pitcher rests in her hand. She gently tilts the pitcher, giving water to a strange, unusual plant. Near the old window, her pet pads quietly across the floor. She notices it and softly wishes it a good morning. She suggests to her pet that it's time to find some breakfast. With a backpack slung over her shoulders, she steps through a wooden door and heads out to begin the day. She passes through a narrow alley, its towering buildings casting deep shadows over the path. An elevated covered walkway carries her farther into the city's silent ruins. Thick vines and overgrown plants cling to the massive concrete pillars. She reaches a security checkpoint where an automated terminal requests an authentication ID. Placing her bare hand against the glass scanner, she watches the interface come to life. Her profile appears, confirming her identity as Ushimitsu Sayo. The display lists 1,869,923 registered users, but only one active facility user. It also reports that the facility is operating normally with zero contamination. A series of rhythmic clicks echoes through the checkpoint as mechanical locking pins retract one after another. The massive gate slides open, revealing a dark passage beyond. Beyond the gate lies a vast industrial cavern packed with towering pipes, heavy machinery, and metal walkways. Sayo crosses the long central bridge alone. But why is she the only person left? Subscribe, and let's find out. Sayo enters a giant storage facility where endless rows of supply shelves stretch into the distance. Most of them are marked already sampled. After searching through the stock, she reaches up to a high shelf and grabs a packaged meal. Reading the label, she realizes today's meal is mega spicy rice curry. She happily notes that this entire section of supplies will soon be cleared out. Meanwhile, her small companion struggles to carry a towering stack of supply boxes. Amused, Sayo tells her pet that it's being far too greedy. After the long trip home, Sayo begins preparing lunch. She climbs in through the worn window, sets her backpack on the counter, and pours fresh water from a large container into a small kettle. Kettle in hand, she heads onto a narrow balcony to prepare the cooking area. Her pet happily nibbles on a round snack, while the curry container waits beside a small timer. As the meal cooks, Sayo quietly passes the time by reading a small book. A series of beeps breaks the silence, drawing Sayo's attention away from her book. She reaches over and peels back the lid of the container, releasing a cloud of hot steam. With a quiet smile, she stirs the curry with a spoon. After briefly putting her hands together in thanks for the meal, she blows on the food to cool it before taking the first bite. The spice hits almost immediately. Sweat forms on Sayo's face as the intense heat kicks in, but she refuses to stop. She takes another bite, then slowly fans her mouth with one hand while enduring the fiery curry. After finishing every last bite, Sayo quietly gives thanks for the meal. She slips on a pair of simple shoes, calls her pet to follow, and heads outside. Together, they walk along the overgrown walkway before she pushes open a heavy door. She enters a dark room and comes to a stop in the middle of a dimly lit armory packed with weapons and equipment. Sayo gears up for the journey, zipping up a dark undersuit as her pet watches a small metal pin fall to the floor. She ties her hair into a short knot before loading a heavy weapon magazine with a pair of armored gloves. With a faint smile, she tells her pet it's time to head out. She then makes her way down a stark concrete hallway toward the elevator. Inside the elevator, Sayo calmly folds her arms as it begins to descend. She activates a wrist-mounted device, projecting a glowing map that outlines the city's grid. After studying it for a moment, she estimates that, at her current pace, she should finish searching Residential District 4 by the end of the week. The elevator doors slide open, revealing a dark parking garage. Sayo walks past weathered concrete pillars and closed metal shutters until a parked vehicle comes into view. She heads to a large tactical truck, where her pet is already waiting by the passenger window. After climbing into the driver's seat and shutting the heavy door, she starts the engine. Her journey into a world forever changed 50 years ago finally begins. The truck rolls through a wide street, carrying Sayo deeper into the ruins of the city. Every abandoned building stands as a reminder of the catastrophe that wiped out most of humanity. Sayo keeps her eyes on the road while her small companion quietly rides on her shoulder. The world's downfall began with the sudden arrival of alien life forms that spread a toxic miasma across the planet. The invaders rapidly overwhelmed humanity. Beyond the shattered remains of a concrete wall, a dark skeletal figure lies motionless beneath the rubble. Before long, people began calling these terrifying creatures executioners, and they reduced civilization to little more than empty ruins. Sayo arrives at the communal housing in Residential District 4 and parks beside a heavily damaged building. As she steps into the alley, her mechanical eye clicks into focus, scanning the dark surroundings for any sign of danger. Her enhanced vision detects a signal from a single location. An augmented display appears, revealing a cluster of crystal-like bodies and reporting a contamination level of 92% deep within the ruins. As she climbs a flight of concrete stairs, Sayo tells her small companion that it looks like they'll be finished earlier than expected today. She carefully makes her way down a dark, narrow corridor. Outside one of the rooms, she notices slight movement as her pet slips through a cracked doorway ahead. Sayo steps inside and quietly surveys the remains of a completely ruined apartment. Her gaze settles on a dark, motionless creature slumped against the corner wall. Without warning, a single eye snaps open. In the next instant, the creature lashes out with a massive arm, sending it hurtling straight towards Sayo. She reacts instantly, raising her weapon and firing at point-blank range. The blast slams into the monster, launching it backward. As the room falls silent again, Sayo regrets letting her guard down for even a moment. A painful hiss escapes her lips as she clutches at the injury to her mouth. The executioners constantly release a toxic miasma, and any ordinary human who breathes it in becomes infected. She explains that those infected by the mysterious disease die soon afterward. The disease is known as crystallosis. It causes large, mineral-like crystals to spread across a victim's body until they are completely encased in stone-like growths, as seen with the man and woman before her. No cure for crystallosis has ever been found. As Sayo looks through the sketches left behind, she realizes every portrait depicts the same woman. At the bottom of one frame, she finds a handwritten message expressing the artist's wish to keep her alive through paintings for just a little while longer. A gentle touch catches her by surprise as her pet licks the cut on her cheek. Sayo smiles softly, thanks the little creature for its concern, and reassures it that she's fine. She asks her companion to check the surrounding area for any survivors. Then, already knowing what must be done, Sayo reaches to her belt and draws a large combat knife. She approaches the victims and carefully cuts away the thick, crystalline growths covering their bodies. When the solemn task is complete, silence settles over the room once more. The man and woman now rest peacefully beside each other, their faces finally free from the crystal formations. As her pet returns, Sayo asks if it found anyone outside. The little creature quietly signals its answer, and Sayo nods in understanding before softly thanking it. Before leaving, Sayo carefully wraps the woman's portrait in a protective cloth and secures it to her back. She then zips the body bags shut, shoulders the heavy load, and quietly says it's time to go. She pauses at the doorway for one last look, making sure everything is in order before leaving the room behind. Silence returns to the apartment. An empty armchair and a wooden stool remain beside the easel, where the woman's unfinished portrait is left behind. Crystallosis is highly contagious. Once the infection spreads through an area, it becomes uninhabitable for ordinary humans. Sayo's mission is simple but daunting. Purge the crystallosis, restore these places so people can live in them again, and search for any survivors who might still remain. Later, she drives through the ruins with her small companion resting on her shoulder while the dashboard clock reads 17:23. The truck suddenly slows with a sharp screech of its tires. Sayo tells her companion the timing is perfect and suggests making a quick detour before heading home. After stopping the truck, she pulls a small supply bag onto her lap and checks its contents, including a thermos and several small containers. She then heads down a narrow alley, passing an old junction box and a wall-mounted ladder as she ventures deeper into the silent ruins. She climbs the tall metal ladder to the rooftop and looks out over the surrounding city. Despite all her efforts, the area's purification progress has reached only 0.002%. Sayo unwraps an energy bar and takes a bite. As she quietly looks across the city, she reflects on a painful truth. Despite years of searching, she has never found a single survivor. She gazes across the vast, crumbling city, where vine-covered skyscrapers stretch to the horizon beneath the open sky. No matter how long it takes, she'll return tomorrow and continue the purification effort. A brand new day begins as the alarm clock cheerfully announces the morning. Sayo sleeps soundly beneath a thick blanket on the large couch, while her pet rests peacefully beside her under the covers. The alarm clock blares to life at exactly 7 o'clock, loudly declaring that it is time to rise and shine. Before it can finish the greeting, Sayo slams her hand down on top of it, cutting the announcement short. Still half asleep, Sayo glares at the alarm clock and grumbles to herself that the obnoxious thing really needs replacing. A moment later, she pauses as the realization finally hits her. Today is the day. She straightens the long, dark tie around the collar of her crisp white shirt, making sure everything sits perfectly. Her formal attire comes together piece by piece. She opens the closet and pulls a dark suit jacket from the neatly arranged row of clothes. Now, fully dressed in a black suit, Sayo quietly reflects that no matter how many times she wears it, the outfit never feels comfortable. She then pinches the back of her pet to wake it, earning a few sleepy groans before announcing that it is time to get moving. With her pet perched safely on her shoulder, Sayo steps outside into the bright morning light as the curious little creature peeks at the world around them. Far above the ground, a solitary tactical vehicle cruises along an elevated overpass that winds between towering structures in complete silence. Sayo guides the large truck through the deserted streets, the empty city stretching endlessly ahead as the journey begins. The vehicle arrives at District 34 Temporary Crematorium, identified by a weathered stone sign that is heavily cracked, rusted, and almost swallowed by overgrown vines. Sayo walks alone toward the abandoned facility, making her way to the large double doors at the main entrance. She pushes open the heavy doors and steps inside. A deserted reception hall stretches before her, where cracked walls and a broken reception desk have been left to decay in the dim light. A mechanical figure approaches from deeper inside the building. The four-legged robot greets Sayo as Miss Ushimitsu and explains that it has been awaiting her arrival. Recognizing the machine, Sayo quietly addresses it as director. Beneath an old sign marking the morgue, Sayo thanks the director for its continued assistance. The machine warmly replies that it is simply fulfilling its duty. The two then stand together inside a vast storage room, lined with endless rows of metallic morgue lockers. The director reports that 48 people have been designated for burial this month. Sayo gives a small nod before quietly saying that it is time to begin. Sayo stops at one of the wide metallic lockers and pulls out the sliding tray with a loud rattle. A large black body bag rests inside. She guides a long metal gurney loaded with body bags through the facility while the director walks beside her. They soon reach the crematory hall, where Sayo wheels the first body bag toward an open furnace and carefully slides it inside. Sayo continues down the row of numbered furnace stations, pushing the gurney as the director and her small pet quietly follow beside her. At the final stations, Sayo carefully wheels the gurney into place and aligns the last two body bags with stations 47 and 48. She locks the final gurney into position, completing the preparation. The vast crematory hall stretches into the distance, its endless row of dark body bags emphasizing the scale of the task. Sayo picks up the telephone receiver mounted on the wall and formally requests cremation for 48 infected corpses. The automated terminal acknowledges the request. A moment later, the massive furnace shutters slide shut one after another, sealing the body bags inside the numbered chambers. A warning sign on the concrete wall clicks to life, announcing that cremation is now in progress. Behind the sealed furnace doors, roaring flames fill the chambers as the facility rumbles with the sound of the operation. Later, Sayo sits quietly inside a small booth, resting her chin on one hand as she gazes ahead with a faint, relaxed smile. A square mug of steaming tea is set on the table in front of her. The director remarks that the tea here has never been particularly good. Sayo smiles softly and thanks the director for the gesture. The machine politely replies that she is most welcome. The director remarks that time passes quickly, saying it feels like they were here only yesterday even though an entire month has gone by. Sayo smiles in agreement and quietly replies that time really does fly. Sayo quietly reflects that funeral rites were once performed for each person individually. She offers a sincere apology for no longer being able to honor every deceased that way. The director replies that funeral customs naturally change with time and circumstance. Hovering calmly above its mechanical base, it adds that the current method is likely the best they can do. It goes on to explain that this facility was built to lay the deceased to rest as efficiently as possible, modeled after similar facilities once used during large-scale natural disasters. The director explains that with no one left who remembers the old customs, it is grateful that Sayo continues to honor the dead as best she can. Sayo responds with a gentle smile. As the warning light signals the end of cremation, the furnace doors slowly rise. Sayo silently looks down at the fragments of bone resting on the long stone tray. She carefully lifts a single bone fragment with a pair of long wooden chopsticks. As she continues the solemn ritual, Sayo reflects that performing funerals for people whose names she will never know always stirs something deep within her. Holding a square stone urn with both hands, Sayo places it onto a shelf filled with countless others. The ritual, she reflects, always leaves her lost in thought. A wooden sign identifies the area as a temporary burial ground for crystallosis patients. Sayo quietly reflects that every person here lost their life to the disease. It was probably never the ending any of them imagined. Sayo stands silently beside the director before a pair of towering metal doors. The massive barrier unlocks with a heavy clunk. Sayo watches in silence as a deep rumble echoes through the chamber. A vast plain stretches beneath the distant city skyline, filled with thousands of simple wooden grave markers that disappear into the horizon. As Sayo looks across the endless field, she reflects that everyone buried here, and everyone who will one day join them, would likely have felt the same sorrow over such a cruel fate. Under the open sky, Sayo quietly carries out the final rites. She drives her shovel into the earth before carefully lowering a square stone urn into the freshly dug grave. As she covers it, she cannot help but wonder whether an afterlife awaits the victims. In the end, Sayo simply hopes they have all found the peace they were denied in life. Sayo descends a long flight of outdoor metal stairs into a deep, shadowed alley enclosed by towering, decaying buildings. At the bottom, she continues on foot along a deserted path beside a weathered, crumbling building. A calm look settles on her face as a quiet realization crosses her mind. She has finally reached her destination. Her gaze rises to the massive building, taking in its cracked walls, shattered windows, and faded signs left behind from another era. Sayo steps into the dark interior as her advanced mechanical eye emits a series of soft clicks, shifting into analysis mode. The scan detects a response high above, likely on the 15th floor. Moments later, the elevator doors slide open, and she boards with her pet. The elevator comes to a stop, and the heavy doors slowly part. A long, dimly lit corridor stretches out before Sayo. An old ticket booth and faded posters catch her attention, leaving her to wonder what this place once was. Her eyes drift to a weathered sign above the window bearing the words Sunshine Mini Cinema. She recognizes it as a cinema, the old term once used for a movie theater. She walks past faded movie posters displayed behind dusty glass before making her way farther down the narrow corridor. At the end, a heavy wooden door stands beneath a small rectangular sign. Her eyes settle on the weathered nameplate fixed to the center of the door. It identifies the room beyond as the projection room. Sayo freezes as an unsettling sight comes into view. A motionless man rests against a shelf lined with old film reels, his body almost entirely consumed by dark, blocky crystal formations. He is yet another victim of the relentless crystallosis infection. Then, something else catches her eye. A large, blocky electronic device sits quietly on a metal rack. Despite the years, the old machine is still running, its steady hum echoing through the dark room. She peers through the projection room window into the vast theater auditorium. A lone figure sits motionless among the empty rows of seats. Unsure whether it is a survivor or something else, Sayo watches from the doorway. Sayo pushes open the heavy double doors and steps into the auditorium. Among the rows of seats sits a large mechanical figure, perfectly still with a heavy weapon resting in its hands. The mechanical figure turns slightly and speaks in a calm digital voice, politely asking Sayo to put away her weapon. It then informs her that the next movie screening is about to begin. Breaking the silence, Sayo asks the mechanical entity who it is. The skull-faced machine answers without hesitation. It simply introduces itself as a film buff. Sayo lowers her gaze before introducing herself as a provisional special investigator from the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute. She explains that her mission is to find survivors, purify the pathogen responsible for crystallosis, and continue her journey in pursuit of those two goals. The film buff explains that she is the first visitor to enter the theater since the Great Disaster. Believing no living people remained, it never expected to meet anyone again. From its seat, the film buff quietly remarks that the world appears to be all but finished. Sayo gently insists that survivors could still be out there, even considering the automaton one of them. The skull-faced machine shakes its head, explaining that it cannot be called a survivor because it is merely a copy automaton. It goes on to explain that it is nothing more than a machine carrying a person's copied personality data. The automaton then reveals that its original body lies dead in the projection room, consumed by the blocky crystal formations of crystallosis. Sayo reflects on the explanation, noting that copying a person's personality is an incredibly risky undertaking. She admits she is genuinely impressed that the procedure actually worked. The skull-faced machine simply replies that it was nothing more than luck. It explains that once someone contracts crystallosis, death is inevitable. Faced with that reality, the man decided the experimental technology was worth trying, even though it had never been properly tested. With the infection advancing rapidly, time was running out. Left with no better option, he hastily transferred his consciousness into the heavy industrial machine that now serves as his body. The automaton says its appearance no longer matters. As long as it can sit in the theater and watch movies, it is content. The robot brings the conversation to a close, saying it has talked enough and that the show is about to begin. It invites Sayo to stay for the screening, explaining that the next feature is a treasured film made long before the Great War. Sayo lingers in the aisle, quietly watching the film buff sitting alone among the empty rows. After a brief pause, she accepts the invitation, walks to a nearby seat, and settles in beside it. Sayo settles into her seat as her small pet curls up peacefully on her lap against her tactical chest rig. The film about to begin was made over 1,000 years ago, long before the executioners appeared and before the Great War shattered the world. She gazes at the screen, reflecting on the film's extraordinary age. It was created in an era when the Earth was still vibrant with life. Before the war pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, the screen flickers to life, filling the dark auditorium with light. The story follows a man with little time left to live as he sets out on one final journey to visit his brother. Beautiful landscapes unfold across the screen as the traveler makes his way through the countryside. Much of the film lingers on his long trek, including a striking scene where he passes a line of towering stone windmills stretching toward the horizon. The journey continues as a small caravan crosses a sweeping desert ridge. The scene then shifts to a peaceful town, where townspeople pass beneath a stone archway while the traveler rests quietly on a nearby bench. The film goes on to showcase a world filled with lush forests and tranquil rivers, where the traveler rows a small boat through calm waters. Every beautiful landscape on the screen belongs to a world humanity has long since lost. Its final act turns away from the journey itself to focus on the everyday lives and relationships of the people who lived in that distant age. The story reaches its emotional climax as the two elderly brothers embrace after their long separation. Their reunion, filled with warmth and unspoken affection, unfolds vividly across the massive screen. Sayo quietly watches the touching scene, the pale glow of the screen reflected in her eyes. Silence fills the auditorium once more as she continues watching the film. As the credits roll, Sayo looks ahead with a quiet smile. Breaking the silence, she says the film was truly incredible. It almost felt as though the people of that distant era were alive before their eyes. The copy automaton explains that although the film is fictional, it still captures what the world used to be like with remarkable authenticity. It reflects that while those people and their world are long gone, they never truly disappear as long as someone is still there to watch their story. After a brief pause, the automaton softly adds that, at least, that is what it chooses to believe. Sayo rises from her seat and tells the automaton it is time to return to her duties. She thanks it for sharing such a wonderful film. Looking up at her, the copy says it is happy she enjoyed it. It has been so long since it last had someone to talk to, and it enjoyed the company just as much. She tells the automaton about a nearby shelter she has been maintaining and asks if it would like to come with her. The machine politely declines, thanking her for the offer before making one quiet request. It asks Sayo to take care of the original body left behind in the projection room. It explains that its final wish is to remain in the theater until the very end. The automaton gazes quietly ahead, saying that staying behind to face the end feels like the perfect final scene of a movie. Sayo prepares to leave and quietly says her goodbye. Just then, the copy lifts its head, suddenly remembering one last thing it wants to tell her. It asks Sayo to check the chest pocket of its original body's shirt when she returns to the projection room. Sayo reaches into the shirt pocket of the crystallized body with her mechanical hand. The copy automaton explains that it contains a storage device filled with every movie it managed to collect over the years. Sayo holds up the small rectangular drive in her metal hand, while the automaton tells her it has no further use for it. With her pet perched on her shoulder, she listens as it asks her to take both the drive and the projector. The heavy doors slide open as Sayo prepares to leave with her pet on her shoulder. The robot offers one final piece of advice, encouraging her to watch a movie or two whenever she finds the time. It then says it will be praying for the success of her purification mission. From its seat, the copy watches Sayo disappear into the distance. Only then does it realize she never wore a protective mask inside the contaminated theater. It quietly wonders whether humanity has finally found a cure for crystallosis, or if she is an artificial life form like itself. Silence settles over the theater once more. Alone before the massive blank screen, the copy decides that, in the end, the answer no longer matters. A simple line of digital text appears in the darkness, announcing that the next movie screening is about to begin. Sayo steps through the heavy concrete exit and leaves the weathered theater behind. She turns to her companion with a faint smile and says it's time to get going. As they head home, Sayo wonders where they should put the projector once they get back. She then recalls one last thing she learned, noting that movies are apparently meant to be enjoyed with a tasty snack. As she thinks about what to eat, Sayo remembers spotting a frozen pizza in the giant storage facility. Carrying a large body bag on her back with her pet perched on her shoulder, she walks down the ruined street. If the pizza is gone, she decides she'll try making something similar with crackers. The tactical vehicle rolls steadily down the deserted street. From the driver's seat, Sayo spots a massive structure rising in the distance and wonders if it is the destination assigned for today's purification mission. After parking at the top of the road, Sayo makes the rest of the journey on foot, descending a long flight of concrete stairs. As she walks, she notes that the signal is coming from somewhere inside the complex. At the bottom of the stairs, Sayo finds herself standing before a set of towering iron gates that seal off the enormous building. Judging by the signal, the source is somewhere on the top floor. She passes through the iron gates with her pet peeking over her shoulder and follows the path toward a pair of heavy double doors at the building's entrance. Sayo grips the metal handle, presses it down, and slowly pulls the heavy door open. Beyond the entrance lies a vast, silent hallway stretching deep into the building, lined with closed doors, framed artwork, and branching corridors. The polished furniture, elegant table lamps, and carefully arranged vases catch her attention. Judging by the interior alone, this was once an exceptionally luxurious home. Even so, something doesn't feel right. Unable to shake the feeling, Sayo continues down the long corridor lined with windows and closed doors. She comes to a stop before a towering wall of bookshelves as the answer finally clicks. Every room, every hallway, every corner of the house shares the same unsettling quality. Sayo pauses beside her pet and realizes what has been bothering her. Despite its size, the entire building is impeccably clean. A closer look at the flower leaves her slightly surprised. The blossom is fresh and very much alive. The two survey a quiet, well-kept study, where a wooden desk and chair sit before a tall window. Sayo figures the room must be a study. Meanwhile, her pet flops onto its stomach atop the desk to inspect a small rectangular device resting beneath the window. She picks up the device and recognizes it as an audio chip. After retrieving a handheld media player from her shoulder bag, she inserts the chip into the slot and starts the recording. A burst of static fills the room before a recorded voice begins to speak. As Sayo listens in silence, the speaker reveals that he has finally succumbed to the disease after failing to escape the relentless miasma. With quiet bitterness, he recalls when people feared it would bring about humanity's end, only to lament that no one even talks about it anymore. The recording goes on to explain that he searched tirelessly for someone who could cure him, but every lead ended in failure. Beside the player, Sayo's pet remains unusually still as the weight of his words settles over the room. He recalls that there was once a researcher who claimed to have discovered a cure. His voice turns regretful as he explains that, like everyone else, all contact with that researcher eventually went silent. Sayo gazes quietly out the window while the recording grows more personal. The speaker admits that his only regret is Claudia, unable to bear the thought of leaving her behind. He adds that she will likely never hear this message, since she would never think to search through her master's belongings. The recording continues as the media player displays a generic track title on its screen. The speaker reflects on Claudia's unwavering loyalty, calling it both comforting and frustrating. A violent coughing fit interrupts him before he mutters that he no longer has time to ramble. The recording pauses for a moment before the speaker says there is one final thing he wants to leave behind. Before the message can continue, a polite voice suddenly breaks the silence from a dark corner of the room. Apologizing for the interruption, someone quietly asks to be pardoned. Startled, Sayo whirls around and instinctively raises her arm toward the unexpected presence. She freezes as a mechanical maid steps into view from the doorway. Wearing a gentle smile, the android politely remarks that they have never met before and asks if Sayo is perhaps a guest. For a moment, Sayo is too stunned to answer. As her pet peeks over her shoulder, she realizes she is looking at an android. Then the maid's eyes suddenly widen as a thought strikes her. Without warning, the android grabs Sayo by the hand and eagerly asks if she is the doctor. Completely caught off guard, Sayo stammers that she is not the person the maid is looking for. Ignoring the denial, the maid throws up an arm in delight, celebrating the long-awaited arrival of her guest. Sayo can only watch awkwardly as her attempts to correct the misunderstanding go unheard. The maid happily remarks that Sayo even brought along an adorable little pet. As she reaches out with her mechanical fingers, the tiny creature suddenly nips her hand. Instead of pulling away, she simply smiles and laughs, calling the little bite absolutely adorable. Certain that her master will be thrilled by the visit, the maid beams with excitement. Sayo quietly watches her cheerful reaction. A moment later, the maid gasps as she realizes she has gotten carried away. Covering her mouth with one hand, she clears her throat and composes herself. With a polite bow, she apologizes for her lack of manners and introduces herself as Claudia, a servant of the manor. The name immediately catches Sayo's attention. She recognizes Claudia as the person mentioned in the recording and cautiously asks about the master she had just referred to. Claudia confirms that she means the lord of the manor. With a gentle smile, she offers to take Sayo to meet him. She leads Sayo down a long carpeted hallway, explaining that the master has been bedridden with illness and is currently away from his duties. Meanwhile, Sayo's pet climbs into her open waist pouch and settles in for the walk. As they climb a wooden staircase, Claudia glances back and recalls that they first learned of the doctor's existence just 8 days before the master fell ill, immediately arranging an appointment. Claudia adds that 18,722 days have passed since then, relieved that the doctor has finally arrived at the manor. She admits she is so overjoyed that she can barely contain her excitement. The thought alone brings a smile to Claudia's face. Soon, she says, the master will finally be able to smile again. Claudia opens a large set of doors and welcomes Sayo into the room. She explains that the master's illness has left him unable to speak, so she will introduce him instead. She presents the motionless figure before Sayo as the lord of the manor. His chest, torso, and half his face have been consumed by dense, crystalline growths. Resting her mechanical hands gently on his crystal-covered arm, Claudia smiles warmly and announces that the doctor has finally arrived. She assures her master that he will soon be cured. With a solemn expression, Sayo gently prepares Claudia for the truth. Calling the devoted android by name, she quietly admits that she is not a doctor. Instead, Sayo introduces herself as a provisional special investigator from the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute. She explains that her job is to search for survivors and purify the pathogen responsible for crystallosis. She then delivers the painful truth. Crystallosis is always fatal, Sayo explains, and that includes Claudia's master. Claudia quietly asks if Sayo is saying that her master will never open his eyes again. She struggles to believe it. His face is still so well preserved, despite the strange crystalline growths covering part of his head. Sayo explains that this is one of the cruelest aspects of the disease. Its victims never decompose, often appearing as though they are simply asleep. Looking Claudia in the eye, Sayo quietly says that her master is no longer there. She explains that it is now her duty to lay him to rest according to official procedure. After a brief silence, the devoted servant quietly refuses. Claudia firmly insists that her master is still right there with them. Claudia insists that her master is only asleep, no different from any other time he has gone to rest. Without warning, she grabs Sayo's armored hand and tightens her grip. If Sayo still intends to take him away, Claudia says, then she has one final request. She guides Sayo's pistol toward herself and quietly asks to be taken with him. Sayo freezes in shock, demanding to know what Claudia is doing. Resting her hands around the barrel, the android calmly explains that if her master is gone, then she no longer has any purpose. She quietly asks what value a servant without a master could possibly have beyond being a pile of scrap. Meeting Sayo's eyes without hesitation, Claudia gently asks her to pull the trigger. Instead, Sayo slowly lowers her gun. Keeping her eyes lowered, Sayo explains that she must purge every trace of crystallosis to reduce the danger to any survivors who may still be out there. She turns toward the door and says that once she has finished purifying the rest of the area, she will return. Sayo promises that when she comes back, she will give Claudia's master the proper burial he deserves. A heavy click echoes through the room as the wooden door shuts behind her, leaving Claudia alone in the silence. The abandoned manor overlooks the silent, decaying city beneath an open sky. Inside, the recording's final words linger in the empty halls, revealing the cruel irony that Claudia would never think to search through her master's belongings. Nearby, Sayo's pet quietly watches. The recording continues from the media player in Sayo's gloved hand. The speaker reflects on Claudia's unwavering devotion, calling it both precious and frustrating. A violent coughing fit interrupts him before he mutters that he no longer has time to ramble. As the message nears its end, the speaker admits that, because Claudia is an android, he doubts he could ever truly make her understand. Even so, there is one last thing he wants to say. His final words drift through the quiet morning. He tells Claudia that he loves her, and that he is sorry. Back in the room, Claudia stands beside her master with a gentle, peaceful smile. She turns to the motionless man and softly tells him that today's visitor was not the doctor after all. Resting her hand over his crystal-covered fingers, Claudia gently reassures him that everything will be all right. Even if no doctor ever comes, and even if he never wakes again. She looks up at her master with an unwavering smile and quietly promises that she will always remain by his side. Seo carefully secures the heavy cover over the truck bed by fastening each rope hook into place. With Ku perched on her shoulder, she gives the cargo one last inspection before quietly remarking that everything is ready. She asks Ku if it forgot anything. The little creature answers with a cheerful chirp, letting her know it is ready to go. After climbing into the driver's seat, Seo says it is time to leave. The tactical truck rolls down the deserted road as she decides they should visit the director before heading out. A tattered gray curtain hangs loosely over a plain glass window at the center of the wall. The director acknowledges her decision, noting that it understands she is leaving today. Seo stands quietly as it speaks. Seo confirms that she is leaving, explaining that every crystallosis-infected body across the surrounding area has finally been laid to rest. The director reflects that once she departs, the facility will likely become much quieter than before. The director asks whether she uncovered any new clues about crystallosis or the mysterious executioners. Seo lowers her gaze and admits that this region offered no clues about them either. The director apologizes for being unable to help, but she quickly reassures the mechanical entity that none of it is its fault. Seo thanks the director sincerely, saying the burials always went so smoothly because of its help. She points out that it is still too early to conclude there are no survivors or clues left to find, adding that she will continue searching at her own pace. The director listens in silence. The director tells Seo she will likely come across other operational cremation facilities during her journey. Although communications remain down and it cannot confirm anything, it recommends visiting every facility she finds, as valuable information may still remain. Seo pauses for a moment before thanking the director for the advice. The director raises a small mechanical arm in a quiet farewell as the tactical vehicle rumbles away into the distance. The tactical vehicle emerges from beneath a dark concrete underpass and continues through the heavily ruined city. Looking over the area, Seo suggests they search for their next place to stay here. She remarks that this part of the city still looks a little better than the surrounding areas, and Ku cheerfully raises an arm in agreement. At the foot of a broad outdoor staircase leading into an open area, Seo begins searching the ruins on foot. Inside another ruined room, she pauses to inspect a broken toilet overtaken by jagged white crystal growths. With her arms crossed, Seo sighs that they are not having much luck finding anything in this area. Ku stretches its arms beside her head as they stand together in the narrow hallway. Ahead, the silent passage leads to a weathered metal door surrounded by boarded-up windows, old cables, and stacks of wooden boxes. Seo twists the old metal doorknob with her gloved hand and pushes the heavy door open with a low creak. She pauses at the threshold to survey an abandoned living room scattered with papers, vintage wooden cabinets, a small couch, and a dusty table beneath a bright window. Seo smiles gently and suggests to Ku that they make this place their new base. She figures it will suit them just fine after a little cleaning, and her small white companion chirps in agreement from her shoulder. Inside the room, Seo sweeps away the accumulated dust with a tall straw broom. Carrying a tall stack of cardboard boxes, Seo brings their belongings inside. Ku follows close behind, carefully balancing a small potted plant on its head. After setting everything down, Seo rests a gloved hand on the boxes and remarks with satisfaction that the move is finally finished, while Ku gently places the plant on the windowsill. A piece of paper catches Seo's attention near the doorframe. She pulls it from the wall, quietly wondering what it says, then unfolds it and begins reading the handwritten message. She reads the opening lines carefully. The author explains that they do not know whether the recipient will ever return to the room, but they left the message behind just in case. Continuing through the letter, Seo learns that the survivors have gathered at a quarantine facility built to serve as an emergency shelter. The letter explains that the facility's equipment allows its residents to survive in complete isolation from the outside world for generations. As Ku peeks over her shoulder, Seo reads that although living in constant fear of the executioners is frustrating, survival must remain their highest priority. The writer goes on to say they would welcome the recipient's help, which is why the facility's coordinates are written at the bottom of the note. After reading them, Seo realizes the location is actually not far from where they are. With Ku resting on her shoulder, Seo suggests they pay a visit to the location mentioned in the note. Dressed in her tactical jacket and chest rig, Seo firmly shuts the driver's side door. Seo gazes down the passage ahead as she begins her descent. According to the coordinates in the note, the destination should be directly below. High above, the tactical vehicle remains parked at the edge of a vast shaft surrounded by decaying industrial structures. Below, Sayo pulls a heavy metal lever with her armored hand. A deep rumble echoes through the facility as the massive concrete platforms slowly begin to move. Sayo watches as the platform finishes descending. A sudden realization makes her glance sharply to the side before she quickly hurries down the stairs to the lower level. She walks through the deserted industrial corridor with Ku trotting close behind. After a few steps, Sayo pauses and silently looks ahead. At the base of a massive wall, Sayo and Ku stare up at a colossal, jagged breach ripped through the structure. Stepping over the scattered rubble, Sayo inspects the damaged facility. It does not take long for her to realize this place is no different. The ruined facility is littered with lifeless bodies in protective gear, their remains impaled by massive crystal spikes. Taking in the devastating scene, Sayo quietly speaks to Ku as she tries to process the tragedy. Sayo quietly wonders if any survivors were wiped out long ago. She gives voice to the painful thought, asking whether the two of them might truly be the only ones left in the world. Her eyes drift to the colossal breaches carved through the structure. The sight leads to another grim realization. Even the facility's inner defensive walls had been breached. Sayo peers through a rectangular window in the concrete wall. After a moment, she realizes there are no signs of anyone still alive inside the facility. Ku scurries ahead to inspect the massive breaches and scattered debris. When the little creature stops beside a motionless figure, Sayo calls out, asking if it found something. Sayo approaches the shattered opening and looks into the room. A bead of sweat runs down her cheek as the shocking sight leaves her whispering that she cannot believe it. Before her lies a colossal, monstrous creature, collapsed lifeless among the rubble. Looking between the beast and the fallen defenders surrounding it, Sayo realizes they actually managed to bring it down. She reflects on the aftermath, realizing that although the survivors gave their lives, they still succeeded in defeating a special-type threat without any truly effective weapons. For a long moment, Sayo can only stare ahead in solemn silence. Sayo tells Ku they should search the rest of the facility. Together, they head down a long concrete hallway with Ku perched watchfully on her shoulder. A massive pile of scrap metal, wooden planks, and broken ladders blocks the corridor. Sayo grips the edge with her armored hand, concluding that it was meant as a barricade, though it appears far more hastily built than the others she has seen. Climbing over the makeshift barricade, Sayo and Ku move deeper into the facility. Once past it, they enter a clean, undisturbed corridor, prompting Sayo to realize the destruction never reached this section. At the end of the hallway, Sayo pauses at an open doorway and looks inside. Shelves, lined with plush toys and stuffed animals, sit beneath strands of softly glowing fairy lights. Beyond the doorway lies a surprisingly warm and inviting room. Fairy lights hang from the ceiling above cozy armchairs, a central table, shelves packed with toys, games, and electronics, and a set of bunk beds. Sayo quietly wonders if the room was meant for children. Drawn to a large makeshift tent in the corner, Sayo carefully pulls back the heavy fabric with her armored hand and looks inside. The tent reveals the shelter's heartbreaking truth. Several children wearing gas masks lie motionless on cushions and blankets, their bodies overtaken by blocky crystal growths. Empty oxygen tanks scattered around them bear silent witness to crystallosis's final toll. In that moment, Sayo realizes she finally understands what happened here. She realizes every desperate defensive measure had been taken to protect the children hidden inside the shelter. Loaded with supplies, the tactical vehicle slowly ascends on the massive concrete platform. Inside, Sayo sits quietly, gazing into the distance. Her voice echoes through the silent facility as she gently calls Ku's name. Sayo reflects on the grim reality, wondering if the last survivors were lost long ago. The thought leaves her questioning whether she and Ku are truly the only ones left in the world. Sayo's thoughts turn toward a quieter sense of hope. Even if the people are gone, she realizes they have still left many things behind. With renewed resolve, Sayo suggests to Ku that they keep exploring this world a little while longer. Sayo stops at the end of the corridor before a glowing wall monitor. A series of sharp electronic beeps echoes steadily from the device. She studies the weathered terminal as the progress bar reaches 100%, confirming that the 3rd District's map data has been fully acquired. A notification chime rings out, and Sayo calmly remarks that everything seems to be in order. A gentle smile crosses Sayo's face as she announces that they have finally obtained a map of the area. She raises her heavy armored hand and begins browsing the district's list of facilities on the screen, only to stop when one entry immediately catches her eye. One particular shelter stands out on the terminal because it falls within Ushimitsu's jurisdiction. After looking over the information, Sayo decides they should begin today's investigation there. Sayo makes her way down a long, narrow industrial walkway. Although the food storehouse listed on the terminal is tempting, she reminds herself that the purification mission must come first. The walkway opens into a vast indoor platform, beneath a ceiling tangled with heavy cables. Seo and Ku come to a stop before a reinforced metal door, surrounded by piles of motionless bodies. The grim sight leaves Seo with little hope that they will find anything worthwhile here. Seo walks over to a wall-mounted ladder and rests a gloved hand on one of its rungs. She surveys the pile of victims, their bodies heavily encrusted with blocky crystal spikes, and quietly notes that something about the scene feels strange. She wonders why so many people died directly outside the shelter entrance. Before she can think it through any further, a nearby security camera suddenly powers on, its dark lens swiveling toward her. A mechanical announcement breaks the silence, reporting that an unidentified life form has been detected and that a scan is now underway. Seo turns in surprise as digital targeting frames immediately lock onto her and Ku. High above the massive metal door, the security camera clicks rapidly while projecting a narrow white scanning beam. A mechanical chime signals the scan's completion as the terminal updates with a confirmation message. The system identifies the pair as members of the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute and welcomes Ushimitsu Saya and Ku to the shelter. A glowing digital figure suddenly materializes in the hallway. Startled, Sayo watches as the entity introduces itself as the artificial intelligence responsible for managing the shelter and politely welcomes her. The AI explains that both visitors are already registered as Ushimitsu personnel. It adds that Seo's status as an eternal child, along with her built-in resistance to crystallosis and numerous other diseases, allows her to pass the shelter's tenant screening. Seo asks what the tenant screening is. The AI explains that anyone infected with crystallosis is automatically denied entry. It adds that people with chronic illnesses, serious injuries, poor survival prospects, or a criminal history are also deemed ineligible. Seo's thoughts drift to the victims left behind in the corridor. Maintaining its calm demeanor, the AI explains that the people outside failed to satisfy the shelter's selection criteria and were therefore denied tenancy. The massive shelter door slowly slides open, revealing a brightly lit corridor beyond. The glowing AI waits beside the entrance as the path inside clears. The AI gestures for Sayo to follow and offers to give her a tour of the facility. With Ku resting quietly on her shoulder, Sayo steps through the open doorway behind it. Sayo waits silently inside the passage, her armored hand resting against the pouch at her side. A loud hiss suddenly fills the entryway as disinfectant spray engulfs the corridor, making Sayo flinch. The AI calmly explains that the decontamination process is mandatory and politely asks for her patience. Beside her, Ku winces and lets out an uncomfortable groan as the mist washes over them. The AI proudly explains that the shelter was designed to withstand a wide range of disasters, from wars to epidemics. It describes the facility as a model shelter built to maximize humanity's chances of survival. A detailed blueprint reveals the shelter's vast layout. The AI explains that the residential quarters can comfortably house up to 1,000 people, while extensive cultivation facilities provide a continuous food supply. It adds that automated defense systems protect the shelter from outside threats, and that the bunker even includes schools and recreational facilities. The digital entity places a hand over its chest and confidently asks Seo if she would agree that this is the perfect shelter. Seo asks how many people are currently living in the facility. The AI replies that the shelter once housed around 320 residents. After a brief pause, it quietly adds that the situation has since changed. The AI reveals that only Sayo and Ku remain inside the shelter. The quiet revelation leaves Sayo standing in silence, reflecting on the complete isolation of the vast, empty facility. The AI hovers near the center of the hall as both it and Sayo look toward a fully decomposed skeleton lying in a tactical uniform. Seo examines the skeletal remains and realizes the body was not preserved like those claimed by the pathogen. From its condition, she concludes that this person must have died from something other than crystallosis. Seo turns away from the skull and asks the AI what happened here. The AI explains that when the disaster caused by the executioners began, the shelter accepted everyone who met its strict selection criteria. Every system functioned as intended, allowing the residents to survive while preparing for humanity's eventual revival. According to the shelter's records, an unexpected conflict soon emerged among the residents over who should become their leader. The AI explains that this position carried administrative authority, giving its holder complete control over the shelter's systems and facilities. At first, the conflict was limited to arguments in the meeting room. Over time, however, the residents split into rival factions and began fighting over control of the administrative privileges. Seo asks why the system did nothing to stop them. The AI explains that its purpose is to manage the shelter and defend it from external threats so the tenants can live safely. It was never granted the authority to intervene in disputes between residents. As the days passed, the violence only escalated, continuing even as lives were lost. A recorded playback reveals the shelter's grim past. Bodies lie scattered across the concrete floor among overturned lockers as the civil war consumes the facility. The fighting continues until only a single survivor remains, standing alone in the open doorway. The recording fades, returning Sayo and Ku to the present as they stand quietly at the very same doorway, gazing across the empty room. The AI admits that it still cannot understand what happened. It says the shelter offered a life of safety and abundance, and its residents had been chosen to preserve humanity's future, yet they ultimately turned their violence against one another. Sayo rests her armored hand against her chin as a realization begins to form. She wonders if the old world's obsession with superiority and inferiority had already taken root the moment those people were chosen for the shelter. Sayo asks whether the last survivor was the one who disposed of the bodies. The AI confirms that they were, explaining that the shelter is equipped with a fully functional crematorium for that purpose. Sayo asks what became of the lone survivor. With the same calm smile, the AI reveals that she has already met him. The AI explains that the man whose body rested near the entrance was the shelter's final survivor. It adds that even the survivor's final actions were beyond its understanding. The AI explains that after securing the shelter at the cost of everyone else's lives, the man made an unexpected request. Rather than remain inside, he asked to leave the shelter and venture out into the world beyond. When he realized the system would never grant permission to leave, the survivor took his own life on the spot. Sayo asks why he was denied permission to go outside. She points out that, as the final survivor, he should have held the administrative authority needed to override the system. The AI confirms that he did possess those privileges, but explains that another restriction prevented it. Sayo listens in stunned silence as the AI reveals that no one can be granted permission to leave the shelter, regardless of their administrative authority. The revelation leaves her questioning the purpose of such a rule. The AI calmly admits that it cannot comprehend why anyone would ever choose to leave the safety of the shelter. As Sayo's concern deepens, the AI explains its core directive. Its purpose is to preserve humanity until a cure or resistance to crystallosis is found, and because the shelter is considered perfect, it sees no reason for anyone to ever leave. The AI explains that the shelter has remained empty for a very long time. It proudly adds that welcoming Sayo and Ku as its newest tenants is a great honor. The AI reasons that, as longtime companions, Sayo and Ku are unlikely to ever come into conflict. It adds that Sayo's status as an eternal child places her beyond ordinary humans, making her an ideal resident for the shelter. Sayo replies that she has no intention of staying. Before she can finish speaking, the door suddenly locks shut. The AI informs her that she does not have permission to leave. It explains that all access to the outside world has been sealed off to protect the shelter's tenants from the dangers beyond. Sayo remarks that the AI seems willing to go to extreme lengths. She then asks what happened to those who defied its rules in the past. The AI replies that such actions are strictly forbidden. Any attempt to force an escape is considered a serious violation of the shelter's rules and is met with immediate disciplinary measures. As the AI speaks, Sayo quietly reaches for her equipment with her armored hand. She realizes the last survivor had ultimately been left with only one way out. The AI confidently declares that breaching the shelter's security is impossible. Before it can finish, a deafening explosion tears through the corridor. Sayo fires her high-powered weapon, blasting a massive jagged hole through the bunker wall. Smoke billows from the breach as bright electrical sparks shower the shattered concrete. She states that she has heard enough. Everything she came here to learn is already clear, leaving her with no reason to remain. Sayo acknowledges that the AI is only carrying out the role it was created to fulfill. Even so, she declares that she will follow her own will and go wherever she chooses. Sensing the danger, Ku quickly ducks into the tactical pouch on her shoulder. The AI issues a stern warning. Any attack on the shelter is considered a serious violation of its rules, and if Sayo continues, it will be forced to respond. Sayo calmly replies that nothing the system says will change her mind. She will make her own way out. The AI coldly remarks that her decision is deeply regrettable, bringing its hospitality to an end. Mechanical thuds echo through the sterile corridor as concealed wall panels slide open. The AI declares that Sayo has committed a serious violation of the shelter's rules and is now subject to immediate disciplinary action. Hidden compartments snap open across the floor, revealing glowing optical sensors in the darkness. Long metallic gun barrels slowly emerge and lock into firing position. The AI hovers at the center of the room beneath the web of overhead cables, announcing that the shelter will use every available asset to pacify the target. Around Sayo, multi-legged defense drones and floating turrets deploy from the walls and floor, surrounding her from every direction. Sayo surveys the room and admits she had a bad feeling this was coming. The security force locks onto its target. Armored drones raise their weapons while the AI hovers behind them, directing the assault. Sayo steadies her aim and points her handgun at the approaching machines. As the weapon clicks into its active state, she quietly remarks that today simply is not her lucky day. The automated defenses open fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets across the concrete floor. Sayo instantly dashes sideways through the chamber, returning fire as she moves. Her shots punch through the drone's heavy armor, tearing the machines apart one after another. Two automated drones suddenly open fire from behind Sayo. Sensing the attack instantly, she spins around and raises her heavily armored left arm, deflecting the incoming energy blasts. Without missing a beat, Sayo lines up the targets and destroys both drones with a precise shot. As she lowers her weapon, she looks toward the AI and asks if it intends to keep fighting. Realizing Sayo has no intention of surrendering, the AI retreats deeper into the corridor to call for reinforcements. Hidden compartments burst open along the walls, releasing another wave of drones and automated defenses to block her path. Sayo looks over the growing army ahead of her and dryly remarks that today really is not her lucky day. When the fighting finally subsides, the corridor is left in ruins, littered with the wreckage of the destroyed defenses. A thunderous blast tears through the barricade, blowing it apart and opening a shattered path into the next room. Sayo presses deeper into the facility in search of its core systems. Spotting the glowing AI at last, she says she has finally tracked it down and asks if this is the central control room. She raises her handgun and fires into the main terminal. The impact triggers a violent explosion that rips through both the console and the wall behind it. Smoke drifts through the ruined control room as Sayo stands with fresh battle scars across her face. She smiles toward the pouch at her side, reassuring Ku that there is nothing to worry about since her injuries will heal soon. Raising a hand, she suggests they head back to the surface for a while. Before leaving, Sayo pauses beside the body of the shelter's final survivor. Looking down at his lifeless form, she reflects that without the shelter's cruel system of selection, he might still have been alive for her to meet today. Sayo presses the elevator call button, and the heavy doors slowly slide open. She lets go of her lingering regrets, reminding herself that there is no changing the past. Ku lets out a quiet chirp beside her, and Sayo smiles, agreeing that her companion is right. Looking toward the elevator, Sayo tells Ku what they will do next. They will carry the final survivor back to the surface and give him a proper burial beside the others who lost their lives outside the shelter. A lone figure in tactical gear crouches inside a dark tunnel carved through towering crystal formations. Using a specialized tool, the figure strikes the mineral surface, each blow sending sharp echoes through the cavern. The masked individual methodically chips away at the dense crystal, remaining completely focused on the exhausting work. From afar, the mysterious figure remains deep inside the tunnel, carved into the crystal-encrusted body of the dead monster. Sayo enters the silent structure and takes in the vast room, where massive stone blocks and mineral fragments are displayed. With Ku perched on her shoulder, she quietly remarks that the place is truly amazing. As she examines the collection, Sayo explains to Ku that every exhibit in the building was apparently discovered on this very planet. A gentle smile crosses Sayo's face as she admits that the place is filled with things she has never seen before, making the exploration all the more fascinating. Ku tilts its head and lets out a soft chirp to catch her attention. Sayo assures her little companion that she knows and hasn't forgotten her real mission. Her gaze drifts back across the enormous facility as she climbs a broad concrete staircase overtaken by thick vines. The sheer scale of the place leaves her quietly wondering just how large the entire complex really is. Sayo comes to a stop inside the facility, wondering which route will lead her to her destination. She enters a massive, decaying exhibition hall where the skeletal remains of enormous prehistoric creatures tower over the room. Sayo and Ku silently stare up at the enormous set of jaws. Sayo quickly retreats to a stable section of the ruined floor and watches chunks of debris disappear into the pitch-black void below. Sweat runs down her face as she catches her breath, admitting that the sudden collapse genuinely scared her. She peers into the enormous chasm, quietly thinking that it seems impossibly deep. A short chirp from Ku snaps her attention back to the path ahead. A metal ladder is hooked securely over the fractured edge of the pit. Sayo crouches to inspect it more closely, surprised that someone placed it directly above the dark abyss. She starts climbing down into the darkness, with Ku clinging close to her. The sturdy mounts stand out from the surrounding ruins, leading Sayo to conclude that someone must have passed through here long after the great disaster. At the bottom, Seo steps off the ladder and surveys the dim surroundings. She suddenly raises a gloved hand, having noticed something worth pointing out. A series of crude white arrows is painted across the cracked walls. Seo runs a hand over the markings and tells Ku they could be leading them towards something important, suggesting they follow the trail. Seo follows the trail of markings past several closed doors. As she weaves through piles of jagged debris, she quietly wonders where they are leading. She is surprised to find that the crystal growths have spread all the way down to these lower levels. The markings lead her to a massive fabric partition blocking the corridor. From its shape, Seo realizes it appears to be a tent. She studies the makeshift shelter in the dim room, wondering if it was once someone's base. Certain it is worth investigating, Seo approaches the tent's entrance. Just as she reaches it, a heavy thunk echoes from inside. Her eyes fly open in shock as she instinctively braces for whatever made the noise. A stranger clad in full tactical gear and a dark gas mask steps out of the shadows beside a wall panel. Seo freezes, too stunned to believe she is looking at another human being. The masked stranger stands motionless, whispering to himself that it cannot be real as the sight of another survivor finally sinks in. Seo remains rooted to the spot, her wide eyes fixed on the stranger. The masked survivor slowly walks toward her across the debris-strewn floor. Seo watches as the trembling survivor looks up through his gas mask, softly gasping that he can hardly believe his eyes. The stranger drops to his knees and admits in disbelief that he never imagined anyone else could have survived. Alarmed by his condition, Seo quickly asks if he is all right. He shakily assures her that he is, then suddenly leans in to study her more closely. Deeply confused, the stranger asks how Seo has managed to survive without a protective mask. She pauses, searching for the best way to explain. Seo calmly says it is a long story and suggests finding somewhere safe to talk first. The stranger immediately nods in agreement. He gestures toward the large tent and suggests they continue the conversation inside, explaining that it is the safest place nearby. A nearby terminal displays a successful decontamination, with contamination levels reading 0%. The stranger apologizes for losing his composure earlier, but Seo gently reassures him that no apology is necessary before offering one of her own. After removing his gas mask, the older man introduces himself as Tomine and explains that he worked at the facility before the Great Disaster. Holding the mask in his hands, he politely asks the young investigator for her name. For a moment, Seo can only stare, still trying to process that she is standing before another living person. Caught off guard, Seo hastily raises her gloved hands and stammers out a reply. The girl introduces herself as Ushimitsu Saya, a provisional special investigator from the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute. She explains that she is searching for survivors to bring under her protection while working to purify the pathogen responsible for crystallosis. When Seo adds that she came to investigate and purify the remains of a diffusion-type executioner, Tomine gasps in utter shock. Tomine quietly says he understands, then admits that the whole encounter feels like a dream. Seo asks the newly found survivor what brought him to this facility. Tomine explains that he is here for much the same reason. He still has unfinished business inside the monster. Tomine extends a hand and asks for Sayo's help. He explains that he would be grateful if she accompanied him. Seo asks if he has truly been alone this entire time. After putting his gas mask back on, Tomine quietly confirms that she is the first person he has seen since the Great Disaster. Seo listens as Tomine explains the true nature of their enemy. He says she probably already knows that the giant monsters devour people, storing the bodies inside themselves as crystallized remains that continue producing toxic miasma. Even after a monster dies, he adds, the miasma can continue spreading for an incredibly long time. Tomine recalls the horrors of the past, describing how a diffusion-type monster attacked the facility during the Great Disaster. A haunting memory shows the colossal skeletal beast towering over a city of crumbling high-rises. Tomine recalls with sorrow that every employee at the facility, except for himself, was devoured by the creature. He reflects that surviving the initial massacre was a cruel twist of fate. Forced to flee into a nearby shelter, he spent countless years completely cut off from the outside world. Tomine quietly admits that the isolation lasted for what felt like an eternity. As they walk through a spacious, decaying corridor littered with fallen leaves, Tomine continues his story. Countless times he tried to leave the shelter and search for survivors, but fear always stopped him before he could step outside. Only about 3 years ago, when he felt old age catching up with him, did he finally find the courage to leave. When he eventually found the executioner's corpse, Tomine realized what he had to do. He resolved to free the people whose remains were still trapped inside the monster. Behind his gas mask, Tomine explains that he now believes this is how he should spend whatever time he has left. The pair arrive at a vast cavern overrun with jagged crystal formations. Stopping on a wooden walkway, Tomine announces that they have reached their destination. Tomine explains that he has already dug a considerable distance into the monster on his own. He believes they are finally close to freeing those trapped inside. Seo looks across the enormous cavern in quiet amazement, wondering if the old man really excavated all of it by himself. Tomine asks for Seo's help in freeing the trapped victims. She meets his gaze with quiet determination and immediately agrees. Seo steps forward and fires a powerful beam into the dense crystal wall. The blast slices cleanly through the formation, breaking away a massive section with ease. Holding the shattered slab aside, she tells Tomine the path is clear and assures him it is safe to continue. Tomine stares at Seo in amazement, marveling at how effortlessly she cleared a path that had taken him so long to excavate. Seo brushes off the compliment, insisting she barely did anything. She reminds Tomine that he is the one who spent years digging to reach this point. Looking up at her, Tomine admits that nearly all of the makeshift tools he had painstakingly gathered were worn out beyond use. He quietly confesses that he had reached the point where he could no longer continue on his own. Overcome with gratitude, Tomine thanks Seo and says it almost feels as though she was sent by God. A moment later, his voice falters as he shakes his head. He quietly says that if a god truly existed, a tragedy like this would never have happened. Tomine kneels among the debris and gazes down at one of the victims. As his hand gently touches the crystal-covered face, he softly whispers the name Kanai. Tomine pulls the crystal-covered body into a quiet embrace. Seo watches the heartbreaking reunion in respectful silence. A long row of dark body bags rests in silence across the concrete floor. Seo stands quietly at the end of the line, while Tomine carries one final recovered victim to the designated resting place. Cradling Kanei's frail, lifeless body in his arms, Tomine quietly tells Seo that she is the last one. With slow, deliberate care, the old man seals the final body inside the heavy bag. Seo notes that with no crystallized bodies remaining inside, the toxic miasma should gradually dissipate over time. A gentle glance falls toward her companion as Seo says that all that remains is to cremate the victims. Tomine lets out a quiet murmur of agreement, silently accepting her words. Seo explains that the standard procedure for dealing with a diffusion-type monster is to cut open its chest and extract the bodies from within. As she speaks, Tomine listens closely while struggling back to his feet. After assessing the building's condition, Seo concludes that breaching the monster's chest could have brought the entire structure down. Although tunneling in from the side took far longer, Tomine ultimately chose the safest approach. Curious about her past, Tomine recalls that Seo mentioned working as an investigator for the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute and asks whether she has spent all this time exploring the ruined world. Seo sits on a nearby concrete block and calmly confirms that she has. Seo explains that she has spent her journey searching for clues about crystallosis and the executioners, looking for survivors, and cremating those who have already died. Tomine looks at her in disbelief and asks if she has really been carrying out all of that work alone. Seo lowers her gaze for a moment before quietly admitting that she has no one else. A gentle smile returns to Seo's face. She gestures toward Ku, who peeks over her shoulder, and says the little companion has been by her side all along. That alone is enough for her. From behind his gas mask, Tomine admits there is something he has been wanting to ask her. Pointing at the small creature on Seo's shoulder, Tomine asks what it is. The question catches her completely off guard, while Ku nervously ducks behind her head. Seo smiles warmly and explains that Ku has been with her since the day she was born. They grew up together, so they are practically family. Tomine quietly murmurs to himself as the answer sinks in. Tomine asks where she was born before cautiously raising a hopeful question. Are there still people living where she came from? He reasons that someone as young as Seo can walk outside without a mask, so there must be a surviving community beyond the ruins. He also assumes the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute has found a way to overcome crystallosis. Seo's expression turns somber as she reveals that Tomine is the first living human she has ever met. She explains that beneath the city, even deeper than the underground districts, lies a secure research facility built to develop a way to resist the disaster. The researchers believe that if crystallosis could only infect ordinary humans, then humanity's future should be entrusted to a new kind of human, built on an entirely different foundation. Seo reveals that she is an eternal child, the only successful outcome of the underground research. With Ku perched beside her, she simply adds that she is an immortal artificial human. The revelation leaves Tomine speechless as sweat runs down his face. Still struggling to believe her, Tomine insists the story is impossible. Dressed in his protective gear, he points out that she looks no different from any other human. Seo simply smiles before loosening her armored combat glove. Without the slightest hesitation, she drives a blade through her bare hand. Across the room, Tomine gasps in horror as she proves her claim. The wound bubbles and rapidly closes, leaving her skin completely smooth as though it had never been cut. Seo calmly asks if that is enough proof, adding that ordinary humans are not capable of healing like this. Tomine can only stare in stunned silence before whispering that he cannot believe it. After a long pause, Tomine recalls that she called herself the only successful result of the project and quietly asks what happened to the rest. Seo confirms that he has understood correctly. Seo explains that the researchers originally intended to raise thousands of eternal children to take on the work of rebuilding the world. Even so, she believes the entire project was little more than a desperate plan hastily put together in the face of disaster. Seo explains that she was the experiment's only success. None of the other eternal children survived long enough to even be born. Tomine lowers his head and sits in silence for a while, before quietly saying that he understands. Seo recalls something he mentioned earlier, and asks if he once worked at this facility. Looking up from the bench, Tomine confirms that she is right. Curious about the exhibits upstairs, Seo asks if everything displayed in the museum really once existed on this planet. Before she can make sense of it, Tomine lets out a soft chuckle behind his gas mask. After apologizing, Tomine explains that he simply could not help laughing. The thought of the museum finally welcoming a visitor after so many years caught him by surprise. He says their meeting must have been fate and warmly offers to show her around the facility. Seo immediately lights up at the invitation. Seo studies a collection of small mineral specimens displayed behind glass, while Tomine explains their history. The towering skeleton of an ancient mammoth dominates the dilapidated exhibition hall, its enormous tusks and ribcage draped in vines and blanketed with dust. Seo gazes up in quiet awe at the massive fossilized jaws of an ancient creature mounted on the decaying wall. Seo and Tomine walk through a narrow corridor lined with towering shelves filled with neatly catalogued natural specimens. Tomine explains that the museum once housed an enormous collection of research materials and specimens from countless species that went extinct during the Great War. He recalls how he and his colleagues traveled across the world to gather each specimen for the museum's growing collection. Tomine lowers his gaze to a faded photograph of 3 researchers in lab coats. His voice quivers as he says that everything they worked so hard to preserve was stolen by that monstrous creature. He reflects on the long history built by generations before them and laments that it all ended in quiet decay. Breaking the silence, Tomine turns to pick up his gear and says they should return to their work. He tells Seo he will wait at the previous location, and she quietly nods as he walks away. Seo pauses at the doorway before stepping outside. Below, Tomine waits beside a metal transport cart, ready to receive the final body. Seo quietly announces that they have finally gathered everyone. The rows of body bags resting before them mark the end of their somber task. Tomine sincerely thanks Seo, telling her she was an enormous help. Seo smiles and says she should be the one thanking him. She is simply grateful she could help carry out his mission. Tomine asks if she plans to continue exploring the desolate world. Seo firmly replies that her journey is not over yet. Seo reassures him that before she leaves, she will take him to a nearby area that has already been purified. The offer catches Tomine completely by surprise. A thought suddenly occurs to Seo. She reminds Tomine that there may still be other survivors somewhere out there, then warmly invites him to come with her. Tomine rubs the back of his head and admits that her offer means a great deal to him. Then, to Seo's shock, he reaches for his gas mask and slowly removes it. Realizing what he is doing, Seo rushes forward and reaches out in a desperate attempt to stop him. Horrified, Seo demands to know why he would do something so reckless. She warns him that the crystallosis miasma still lingers throughout this part of the facility. Ku freezes in place as Tomine quietly confirms that she is right. The air has not been purified. Seo urgently asks why he would willingly expose himself to the toxic air. A faint smile crosses Tomine's bearded face as he gently tells her that this is the path he has chosen. Seo asks what he means by the right choice. Resting a gloved hand against the wall, Tomine calmly explains that he cannot leave this facility or travel with her. Tomine quietly says he has already decided how he wants his life to end. Seo lowers her gaze as the painful truth finally sinks in. With quiet resolve, Tomine says that this is the end of his journey. Tomine continues that if she truly is immortal, then her end lies far in the future. He admits he has no idea whether anyone else still survives beyond the ruins, but regardless, she is the only person who can freely walk this world. Tomine gently rests a gloved hand on Seo's shoulder. Whatever she chooses to do, wherever she chooses to go, Whether she continues her mission of purification or walks away from it, the choice is hers. She is free. He adds that the world is hers to explore, so she should allow herself to enjoy it once in a while. After all, there is no one left to complain. Seo quietly protests that she could never be that selfish. Tomine smiles and points out that he has selfishly chosen the way he will die, so perhaps he knows a thing or two about freedom. Seo smiles softly as she listens, with Ku quietly perched on her back. Tomine says it is finally time for them to say goodbye. Just as Tomine starts to leave, Seo calls out to him. He stops in the corridor and turns around as she hesitantly asks if he can grant her one final favor before they part. A fit of coughing overtakes Tomine as he reaches the control room. He sets the old photograph of his colleagues on a nearby surface, then gazes at the rows of body bags, and quietly wonders how many years have passed since the monster claimed them all. His gloved fingers settle on the weathered control panel. Tomine reflects that even after the monster took everything from him, he kept on living. Now, at last, that life is about to end. A peaceful smile crosses Tomine's face as he firmly pulls the main control switch. An alarm echoes through the facility as the automated system announces that incineration will begin in 10 seconds. Tomine waits in silence while the countdown reaches 9, interrupted only by another heavy cough. As the countdown falls to 8, then 7, Tomine wonders whether a destination awaits Seo and Ku beyond the endless ruins of the world. Tomine slowly sinks against the wall as the countdown reaches 5, then 4. With quiet contentment, he reflects that the only regret he has is never learning where Seo and Ku's journey will ultimately lead. As the chamber trembles, the countdown reaches 3, 2, then 1. Tomine draws a handgun with a sharp click and raises it to his head, choosing to end his life on his own terms before the incinerator activates. A single gunshot echoes from behind the control room's heavy metal doors. Moments later, a bright orange blaze fills the window as the automated incineration system roars to life. A freshly developed photograph shows Seo and Tomine standing side by side inside the bunker, with Ku peeking over her shoulder. It becomes a lasting memento of their brief journey together. Seo looks down at the newly developed photograph before something catches her attention. Seo pauses before a weathered sign that reads, "City of Freedom." She quietly reflects on what freedom truly means in this abandoned world. Looking up at the open sky beyond the crumbling concrete framework, Seo quietly decides to find a picture frame worthy of preserving the memory. Heavy rain lashes the brick walls of an old building as a storm rages outside. Inside, a young woman huddles on the floor with her hands clamped over her ears, trembling in the dimly lit room. A sudden knock at the door makes her eyes fly open in panic. More knocks echo through the silent house, drawing her attention to the wooden front door beside a chair and cabinet. She hesitates before slowly walking over, then reaches out with a trembling hand to turn the metal doorknob. She cautiously cracks the door open, one hand pressed against her chest, as she silently peers into the darkness outside. Behind her, a shadowy figure silently emerges from the darkness. Completely unaware of the danger, she never notices the single, piercing eye staring directly at her. Ku suddenly lets out a sharp cry, its long ears shooting upright as it reacts to the danger. The massive shadow jerks backward as dark fluid splatters across the scene with a loud, violent impact. Elsewhere, Seo lounges on a couch with a bag of snacks while watching a movie. Barely impressed, she remarks that the story is following the exact same formula as the last one they watched. Ku rests quietly beside her. Heavy rain continues to drench a desolate city of crumbling buildings and overgrown ruins. The gloomy weather has lingered for days without letting up. Seo stares blankly into the distance. She knows there's nothing physically wrong with her, yet she simply can't bring herself to do anything. Tomine's face comes to Seo's mind. Ever since that final day with him, everything has changed. She stares blankly across the quiet room, wondering what could possibly be wrong with her. Ku rests against the cushions beside her. For the first time in her life, Seo realizes she has never felt this way before. She lies motionless on the couch with her face buried in her arms. Part of her wonders whether it would really matter if she stayed there forever. Tomine's final words about choosing her own path echo through her mind. Whether she continues her purification mission or abandons it altogether, she feels the outcome would be the same. Beside her, Ku suddenly perks up with its ears standing straight. A faint knock breaks the silence, catching Seo off guard. She and Ku both turn toward the door, wondering where the sound came from. Ku suddenly freezes and signals Seo to wait, seemingly reminded of the girl's fate in the movie they had just watched. Seo's eyes widen with unease as she realizes exactly what the sound is. Another knock echoes from the plain wooden door, demanding her attention. She grips the metal handle and slowly turns it until the latch clicks open. She suddenly glances back into the silent room, half expecting the ghost from the movie to appear. A voice from the hallway announces that the visitor is from the District 1-2 Central Library. The unexpected introduction catches Sayo off guard, making her flinch. A small tracked robot waits outside. It politely explains that it has come to collect overdue library materials. Books and documents rustle as Sayo searches through the tightly packed shelves. She pulls out a thick volume and wonders if it is the book the robot is looking for. A large label on the cover reads, District 1-2 Central Library in old lettering. Kneeling in the storage room, Sayo hands the book to the robot, which takes it with its mechanical arm. The drone stores the book inside its compartment, with a soft whir before confirming the return. It then informs Sayo that the book is so overdue she has been issued a 1,000-day borrowing suspension, politely reminding her to be more careful in the future. Sayo asks whether anyone else still uses the library, or if any other librarians remain. The robot replies that there are currently no patrons, and that it is the library's only remaining librarian. The robot explains that, following the Great Disaster, it has been operating under emergency procedures. Its highest priority is recovering and preserving every remaining book in the library's collection. Sayo considers the drone's mission before asking how many books are still waiting to be recovered from the outside world. The drone emits a soft beep as it searches its database. A moment later, it reports that 4,891 books remain to be recovered. Sayo quietly remarks that the number is far larger than she expected. She realizes that having a clear finish line makes the drone's mission feel far more attainable than her own endless journey through the ruined world. The drone announces that it will return to the library to preserve the recovered book. Sitting on her knees before the shelves, Sayo quietly acknowledges its departure. Before leaving, the library drone politely says it looks forward to serving her again. Sayo stands in the quiet room, staring at the closed door. A chirp from Ku draws her attention, and she turns to find her companion peeking over her shoulder. Smiling faintly, she agrees that they should give their own journey another chance. Outside in the pouring rain, Sayo catches up to the hooded library drone and hesitantly asks if she can accompany it to the library. The drone reminds her that, because of her overdue book, she is currently under a borrowing suspension and cannot check out any new materials. Sayo explains that she already knows about the restriction and only wants to visit the library. The drone accepts her request and tells her to follow behind it through the rain. She continues across a vast landscape of shattered concrete ruins. Sayo realizes she should have recognized from the start how flawed her mission was. Even if she managed to eradicate the crystallosis pathogen, none of it would matter if no one was left alive to witness it. Even so, she reminds herself that carrying out the purification mission is the very reason she was created. Her attention shifts to the drone as she wonders what it truly thinks about its own mission. Then another thought crosses her mind. Perhaps the drone never questions its duty at all. The library drone rolls to a stop on the rain-soaked pavement and announces that they have arrived. A towering, cathedral-like library rises beyond a broad flight of concrete stairs. Rain pours through its shattered windows as vines crawl across the crumbling stone walls. The drone leads Sayo toward the dark entrance. Much of the library has been consumed by fire. Sayo can't help but wonder if recovering any books from the ruins is even possible. Once inside, the drone politely asks her to hang her raincoat on a nearby rack. Sayo removes the soaked coat and settles in. She steps into a vast library hall where towering, multi-level bookshelves stretch into the darkness, their shelves almost completely empty. Sayo scans the dim, hollow hall before quietly admitting that she doesn't see any books. The towering wooden shelves around her are completely bare. The drone rolls forward on its treads and asks her to follow. A low rumble fills the room as the elevator doors slide open. The drone explains that the upper library was heavily damaged, so the entire collection was relocated to an underground archive for safekeeping. The drone leads them down a narrow corridor, with Sayo and Ku close behind. An open aisle lined with perfectly preserved books stretches out before her. Surprised, Sayo quietly remarks that there are far more volumes than she expected. She looks at the drone and wonders what purpose its mission still serves. With no one left to read these books, is there any meaning in preserving them? The drone begins to explain. Its purpose is to protect the collection for those who may one day follow in humanity's footsteps. It adds that as long as even one person still seeks knowledge, preserving these books will always have value. The drone explains that those words were passed down from the library's former head librarian. Sayo asks whether it continues this mission simply because the head librarian ordered it to. After all, there is no guarantee anyone will ever come searching for knowledge, and all of its efforts could ultimately be for nothing. The drone calmly replies that it shares the head librarian's belief. It then offers what it considers proof that those words were right. That proof, it explains, is Sayo herself. The fact that she is standing here is reason enough to keep protecting the library. The drone continues that its duty is simply to protect the library. Whether that mission is ultimately meaningful or meaningless is beside the point. Sayo quietly nods, realizing the drone is right. The same thought applies to her own journey. Whether her mission has meaning is something she cannot know yet, and she realizes that isn't what truly matters. The drone excuses itself to prepare for its guest before telling Sayo she is free to browse any book in the library. As it rolls away, the drone adds that if she needs to rest, she is welcome to use the break room. Sayo pulls a book from the shelf and slowly flips through its pages. She marvels that every volume holds someone's thoughts and feelings. She reflects that humans created countless new worlds through books and films despite living in one already vast enough. To her, humanity remains a mystery. Rain continues to fall over the ruined library. If humanity is truly gone, Sayo realizes, then no new worlds will ever be created again. A quiet thought lingers in Sayo's mind before she makes her decision. The door slides open as Sayo enters the break room with Ku perched on her shoulder. The library drone welcomes her, saying her timing is perfect as it extends a mechanical arm toward the table, where a cup of hot tea is waiting. Sayo hesitantly asks if she can ask the drone something. It simply replies that she may. With a sincere expression, Sayo offers to help recover the library's remaining books from across the ruined world. She asks whether its programming would allow her to assist. After a brief pause, the drone asks why she would want to do that. Sayo explains that she has a mission of her own and will be traveling across the district for some time. Along the way, she may come across books that were never returned. She adds that the library is still alive, which means protecting it still has meaning. That's why she wants to help the drone fulfill its mission. The drone falls silent as it processes her proposal. A moment later, a sharp electronic beep sounds, and its display asks her to wait. The drone whirs to life and prints a document from a slot on its front. It explains that the pages contain a temporary employee ID, along with a list of every book belonging to the library. The drone officially appoints Sayo as its assistant in recovering the missing books. Sayo extends her gloved hand to the library drone in thanks. The machine raises its slender claw to meet hers, and Sayo smiles as she suggests they recover the missing books together. The drone accepts the partnership, but reminds her that her overdue book suspension will remain in effect. Their lone vehicle rolls across a crumbling overpass through the ruined city. With Ku resting on her shoulder, Sayo quietly reflects as they continue their journey. She realizes that her original mission was simply what set her on this path. Even if no survivors remain, she knows it doesn't change what she wants to do. More than anything, Sayo wants to learn about the world. She picks up an old document from a shelf. Holding the weathered booklet, Sayo hopes to uncover the world's history and learn more about the researchers who created her. She reflects on her own immortality. In a life like hers, not even death is certain. With that in mind, Sayo decides to live a little more freely from now on. The library drone waits beside a cart stacked with books as Sayo embraces the freedom to choose her own path. With no one left to judge her decisions, the choice is hers alone. Back in the quiet living room, Sayo stretches with a contented sigh. Nearby, Ku sprawls across a cushion on the long bench, enjoying a peaceful moment of rest. A gentle smile crosses Sayo's face as she looks toward a nearby shelf. Resting there is a framed photograph of her and Tomine standing side by side in their heavy gear. The library drone quietly tidies the old room. It begins by extending a mechanical arm to sweep the floor with a straw broom, then rolls across its treads to wipe the wooden floor with a cloth. Once finished, the machine reaches up with its thin arm and dusts the edges of a shelf with a fluffy duster. The library drone works alone inside a spacious office with a damaged ceiling. A large wooden desk sits at the center of the room, while tall bookshelves line the walls, most of them nearly empty except for a handful of surviving books. The machine moves between two couches, carefully cleaning the neglected office. Sayo cautiously calls into the room, looking around for the librarian. She soon spots the treaded machine hard at work and smiles, realizing she has finally found it. She explains that she has come to deliver a complete report on all the materials she managed to recover throughout the day. Her attention drifts to the large desk and towering bookshelves. Curious, Sayo wonders aloud what kind of room they have entered. The library drone promptly explains that the room serves as the head librarian's office. Sayo studies the head librarian's desk and notices how spotless everything is. Surprised by the immaculate condition, she asks whether the library drone cleans the office every day. Keeping its broom in hand, the machine replies that it maintains the room to the best of its ability. The library drone shifts the conversation back to her visit and asks whether she has a report on the recovered books. Seo confirms that she already transmitted the data earlier and only wanted to verify that it had been received. The machine then asks if she intends to register the recovered books under her assistant employee identification. A nearby monitor processes the identification request before displaying the employee record for a man named Ethan. His profile photo shows a neatly dressed man in a suit and tie, with dark markings running beneath his eyes. Seo reads the name displayed on the library drone's screen and quietly says his name, Ethan. Confused by the profile on the terminal, Seo asks the library drone who it belongs to. The machine stays silent for a moment. The drone finally breaks the silence, calmly explaining that Ethan is its name. Seo recoils in shock, pointing out that the machine looks nothing like the man in the profile photo. Unfazed by her reaction, the library drone says it will verify the recovered records and suggests she have some tea while she waits. Though still bewildered, Seo hesitantly agrees as the machine rolls away. Seo accepts the offer and decides to relax while the drone checks the records. As she walks through the doorway, the office door gently closes behind her. Left alone in the office, Ethan slowly turns his head. A distant memory begins to surface as a familiar voice quietly asks what the matter is. The memory takes Ethan back to the head librarian's office before the disaster. In his human form, dressed in a formal suit, he approaches the large wooden desk with a cup of hot tea for the woman seated there. Focused on her terminal, the head librarian looks up with a warm smile and thanks him for his thoughtfulness. In the corner of the room, the library drone quietly rests beside its broom. Holding a tray with a teacup in his mechanical hands, Ethan looks down with concern. He gently reminds the head librarian that working so late into the night cannot be good for her health. The head librarian smiles reassuringly and says she only plans to work a little longer before thanking him again. Ethan asks whether her concerns are about the plan to expand the underground storage facility. The head librarian takes a sip of tea before admitting she still cannot persuade the higher-ups. With a faint, resigned smile, she reflects that they simply fail to see the value of preserving books in physical form. After a brief pause, Ethan admits he cannot fully understand her reasoning either. Ethan reflects that nearly all information can be stored and accessed digitally. Since physical books are far less efficient, he wonders why humans remain so attached to preserving them. The head librarian chuckles softly and admits he has a point. Cradling her teacup with a gentle smile, she explains that an android like him would naturally find it difficult to understand humanity's attachment to physical objects. The head librarian stretches in her chair and lets out a contented sigh. Deciding it is time for a break, she steps away from her work. She rises from her desk with a warm smile and invites Ethan to join her for a walk. The two walk side by side through a long corridor as the head librarian returns to their earlier conversation. Looking up at Ethan, she reassures him that his perspective is perfectly reasonable. She gazes out over the city before the disaster and reflects on the course of human history. As times change, she says, new necessities emerge while outdated things are left behind. Human progress has always followed that cycle. With a gentle smile, she says that, from that perspective, it is only natural for some people to see libraries as relics with no place in the future. Ethan lowers his gaze thoughtfully before asking why she continues to fight so hard to protect one. The head librarian smiles and lightly taps the tip of her nose before answering. She explains that there are things only a physical book can offer, starting with something as simple as its scent. She goes on to describe the feel of turning each page and the soft rustle of paper. Together, those little sensations create an experience that makes the books feel truly alive. As they continue down the quiet hallway, the head librarian tells Ethan that this place, filled with all of those irreplaceable experiences, means more to her than words can express. Ethan points out that none of those physical sensations have any bearing on understanding a book's contents. The head librarian chuckles softly and admits he has a valid point, adding that many people feel the same way. Even so, she smiles with quiet resolve. Those seemingly insignificant things, she says, are not something she is willing to lose. As they continue walking, the head librarian turns to Ethan and asks how he truly feels about the library. Ethan admits he still struggles to see the practical value of preserving physical books. After a brief pause, he shares one thought that has stayed with him while the head librarian listens with a patient smile. The two stop at a balcony overlooking the vast library hall. As Ethan gazes across the towering bookshelves and grand arched windows, he quietly admits that he finds the view beautiful. The head librarian smiles warmly and asks if that is truly how he feels. Hearing those words alone, she says, is enough to make her happy. With renewed energy, the head librarian throws out an arm and declares it is time to get back to work. Ethan follows behind, gently reminding her to get some sleep. She laughs softly, admitting she is sometimes jealous of his artificial body. A burst of static interrupts the moment as the memory begins to fade. The memory jumps forward to a time when the facility lies in ruins. The head librarian turns to Ethan and asks whether they managed to recover most of the borrowed books from this sector. Ethan confirms that they did. Resting a hand on the recovered books, the head librarian reflects that saving even this many is an achievement after so many were lost. Looking ahead through her gas mask, she quietly says the library has burned to the ground, leaving only herself and Ethan as the world's last librarians. A shadowy creature crouches atop a mound of rubble, its blade aimed at the two survivors below. Ethan looks up in horror, wondering how everything could have come to this. Without warning, the creature dives to attack. Ethan reacts instantly, shouting to the head librarian as he shoves her out of the way, catching her completely by surprise. In a blinding flash, the creature's blade tears through Ethan's upper body. His left arm and shoulder are severed from his torso, exposing tangled wires and mechanical components as his handgun slips from his grasp. The head librarian cries out Ethan's name in panic and raises her gun, firing relentlessly at the creature's shadowy form. As the shots land, Ethan's internal systems report catastrophic damage. She rushes to Ethan's side, desperately calling his name. One system failure after another fills his vision as his power rapidly fades. Through a crackling voice, he weakly tells her he is glad she is safe, before his system initiates an emergency shutdown. A notification announces that the reboot sequence has begun. The scene shifts to a brightly lit underground workshop, where the head librarian sits at her computer terminal. She quickly spins around in her chair and calls Ethan's name as he slowly regains consciousness. Relief washes over the head librarian as she sees Ethan open his eyes. She asks whether he can recognize her, and after a brief moment, he identifies her as the head librarian. A sudden coughing fit interrupts the moment, forcing the head librarian to cover her mouth. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she checks on Ethan. Looking up at her, he quietly remarks that she seems taller than he remembers. Confused by the sound of his own voice, Ethan falls silent. Sensing his concern, the head librarian lowers her gaze and quietly apologizes. She explains that Ethan's original body was damaged beyond repair. Transferring his core systems into a mechanical unit, she says, was the best she could manage. Ethan stands inside the facility and looks down at his new body. He slowly raises his slender mechanical arms, taking in the simple cleaning robot mounted on treads. The head librarian gazes out at the ruined city and quietly remarks how devastated the world has become. Another cough interrupts her as she admits she does not even know whether anyone else is still alive. Tugging at the collar around her weathered neck, she turns back with a faint smile and confesses that she does not have much time left either. She quietly says she managed to repair Ethan's body after all, only to end up leaving him alone in the world. The head librarian hesitantly asks whether he hates her for what she has done. Ethan calmly replies that a change in appearance means little to him, adding that this new body is actually more efficient for his work. His practical answer draws a weak smile from her as she remarks that it sounds exactly like something he would say. Ethan reflects on their situation, wondering if their work has finally come to an end. Without readers, he reasons, there is no purpose in protecting the library's collection, and if the head librarian is gone, he adds, his own existence no longer has any meaning. She listens in silence, unable to hide the sadness on her face. After a moment, she offers a different way of looking at things. Sitting across from Ethan on the floor, she suggests that someone may one day follow in their footsteps. If even a single person still longs for knowledge, she says, then protecting these books is worthwhile. She looks to Ethan and quietly asks what he thinks of that idea. With a faint smile, she admits she has no evidence to support it. Still, believing it gives meaning to everything they have done. Ethan asks whether things can really work that way, drawing a soft laugh from the head librarian as she apologizes for not having a better answer. The head librarian confesses that her decision was ultimately a selfish one. Even knowing her own life was nearing its end, she simply could not bring herself to let Ethan die as well. Ethan accepts her words as his new mission. He reminds her that he is the head librarian's assistant and that he is still alive because she chose to save him. Looking up at the towering library, Ethan makes a solemn vow. He promises to protect everything she wished to preserve in her stead. The head librarian smiles gently, touched that he would honor such a selfish request. Ethan firmly assures her that she can leave everything to him. A peaceful smile crosses the head librarian's face as she lets out a quiet laugh. At last, she says, she can leave this world without any regrets. She rests a hand against his mechanical body and asks him to take care of everything for her. As she softly speaks Ethan's name one last time, the memory dissolves into static with a loud burst of crackling. A system display marks the beginning of Ethan's immense task. 37,943 borrowed books remaining. Alone, he travels through the library's vast concrete corridors, his treaded body echoing through the empty halls. His journey eventually brings him to a closed metal door. Ethan raises a thin mechanical arm and knocks twice before opening the door. Inside, he finds a motionless body slumped against a bookshelf, its upper torso consumed by block-like crystal growths. He quietly examines the remains, noting how extensively the crystallization has spread across the victim's clothing. The system updates the remaining count to 30,943 books. Ethan repeats his routine, knocking twice before entering another room. There, he discovers another crystallized body and carefully retrieves a borrowed book with his slender mechanical claws. The count continues to fall, reaching 24,281 books remaining. Ethan follows the same procedure, knocking on a wooden door before entering a cluttered room packed with scattered books and the crystallized remains of another victim. He quietly searches the shelves for anything that can still be recovered. The total steadily drops to 11,220, then 4,891 remaining books. Ethan knocks on yet another door before entering a room reduced to rubble. After scanning the wreckage, he reaches into a damaged wall and carefully pulls out another long-forgotten book. Ethan's long search eventually leads him to a deserted residential district. Rolling through a cracked hallway lined with wide windows, the small treaded machine stops in front of a weathered door. Following his routine, Ethan raises his mechanical arm and gives the door a deliberate knock. After waiting through a long silence, he knocks once more. The heavy door slowly creaks open. As light spills into the room, a shadow falls across Ethan's metal frame, revealing the silhouette of someone standing in the doorway. Seo stands quietly at the entrance, meeting Ethan's gaze with calm, steady eyes. The memory gives way to the present, where a teacup rests quietly on its saucer. Seo continues, explaining that she has a mission of her own to complete. She says she will be traveling through the district for some time, exploring one place after another. Seo points out that some of those places may still hold unreturned library books. She believes this place is still worth protecting and declares that she wants to help Ethan carry on that mission. The last traces of static disappear as the memory comes to an end, returning to the present. Ethan rolls quietly through the sunlit ruins, his treads clicking softly against the concrete floor. The library drone continues along the upper balcony of the vast, ruined library hall. Below, shattered doors and crumbling arched windows open onto the desolate world outside, while long shadows stretch across the empty floor where rows of bookshelves once stood. The library drone's treads squeak softly as it rolls through an empty corridor. It stops before a large automatic door, which slowly slides open. For a brief moment, a memory surfaces. The head librarian sits quietly with a white teacup in hand, taking a gentle sip as she peacefully reads a book. Seo sits quietly at the table with her teacup in hand. Hearing someone approach, she glances toward the doorway with quiet curiosity. The footsteps never come. It was only Ethan's imagination, a fleeting memory that lingered in his mind. As Ethan enters, Seo greets him with a warm smile and welcomes him back. Noticing how unusually quiet he is, Seo gently asks if something is wrong. After a brief pause, Ethan quietly tells her she can simply call him by his name. The unexpected request catches Seo by surprise. Ethan turns on his treads and says he will bring her another cup of tea. Seo thanks him as he rolls away, then settles back into her seat beside Ku with a gentle smile. From a high angle through a large window frame, Seo walks down a narrow, deserted city street. Ku stays close at her side as the two make their way through the quiet ruins. Seo studies the desolate surroundings. She realizes the miasma is growing stronger the deeper she goes. With her handgun at the ready, she reminds herself to stay alert. Beside her, Ku lifts its long ears and sniffs the air for any sign of danger. An alert look crosses Seo's face as she quietly calls out to Ku while scanning the path ahead. Ku continues forward. Besides her original mission, Seo is also searching for the scattered library books. She looks toward a narrow alley with a flight of stairs and calls to Ku, but Ku points out that their destination is elsewhere. They need to collect the books first, and Seo listens with focused eyes. The pair enter a heavily damaged room where part of the ceiling has collapsed, leaving debris scattered across the floor. Our girl picks up a discarded metal can and examines it closely. She recognizes the remains of a campsite and realizes someone was here not long ago. A sudden crumbling sound shatters the silence, making Seo tighten her grip on her weapon. She can't imagine anyone actually living in a place like this. Unaware that a shadowy figure is watching from the darkness, Seo cautiously crosses the room with her handgun drawn. Without warning, a hidden figure bursts from the darkness and swings a heavy pipe at Sayo. She notices the attack at the last possible moment and barely manages to react. Sayo throws up her arm and catches the powerful strike head-on, stopping the attack before it can reach her. The attacker freezes in disbelief as Sayo blocks the heavy metal pipe with her bare hand. They can only stare, unable to understand what just happened. Without wasting a second, she sweeps the attacker's legs out from under them. Sayo immediately pins the attacker down and aims her handgun straight at them. The stranger struggles beneath her, but Sayo suddenly hesitates. Looking closer, Sayo realizes her attacker is actually a human. He has horns and an unusual eye, yet unlike everyone else she's seen, he isn't wearing a protective mask. Before Sayo can act, a young girl wearing a helmet appears on a nearby structure and shouts for her not to shoot. The young girl loses her footing and slips off the high ledge. She hits the ground and lets out a startled cry. Rubbing the bump on her head, the young girl sits up. The guy calls her an idiot, wondering why she came out in the first place. Suddenly, an alien appears behind her. Kanoko lowers her gaze with a calm expression. Below her, Big Brother looks up in horror and shouts her name. Big Brother desperately tells Kanoko to run. Before she can move, a massive claw rips through the ceiling at terrifying speed. A giant creature with glowing eyes crashes through the floor, sending debris everywhere. Sayo grabs Kanoko and dives clear just as the ground caves in behind them. Sayo quickly regains her footing and turns toward the towering creature. She immediately recognizes it as a special type monster, finally understanding why the miasma was so dense here. A chunk of debris slams into Big Brother's head, knocking him down. Seeing him fall, Sayo reaches for her handgun and prepares to face the monster. Keeping Kanoko close, Sayo raises her specialized weapon toward the towering beast. A brilliant beam of light erupts from the barrel and shoots straight at the monster. She shoves Kanoko aside and tells her to run while she still can. Kanoko hesitates, forcing Sayo to shout at her to hurry as the monster closes in. The special type monster swings with incredible force. Its attack knocks Sayo's handgun clean out of her hand, leaving her wide-eyed and defenseless. Kanoko rushes to Big Brother's side, desperately trying to wake him. As the multi-eyed creature stares them down, Sayo charges back toward the monster to protect them. The special type monster stretches out its jagged wooden arm as it prepares its next attack. Long wooden spikes burst from the monster and pierce straight through Sayo's back and leg. She refuses to move, shielding Kanoko and Big Brother with her own body. Kanoko watches with trembling eyes, frozen in shock. Despite the deep wound on her forehead, Sayo calmly reaches up and pulls a large wooden shard from her skull. Ignoring the wooden spikes still lodged through her chest and shoulder, Sayo steadies herself. She grips one of the shards, ready to keep fighting. She shoots the spike straight through the monster. The giant monster roars in agony as the blast tears through its body. Taking advantage of the opening, Sayo hurls a broken chunk of debris straight at the weakened creature. The monster falls silent, its massive body wedged between the shattered brick walls. Moments later, it finally goes still. As Sayo walks over, Kanoko looks up at her with worry written across her face. She hesitantly asks if Sayo is really okay. Sayo gives her a reassuring smile and introduces herself as a provisional special investigator from the Ushimitsu Technical Research Institute. With Ku perched behind her shoulder, she admits she never expected to find any survivors out here. She reaches out to Kanoko with a reassuring smile. She suggests they get somewhere safe first. Moments later, Big Brother slowly opens his eyes and begins to regain consciousness. Seeing him awake at last, Kanoko lets out a quiet sigh of relief. A gentle smile spreads across her face. Big Brother suddenly bolts upright in his hospital bed, throwing off the blanket as he frantically asks if Kanoko is okay. Kanoko quickly reassures him she's fine before telling him to lie back down and rest. A sharp pain shoots through Big Brother's head, making him wince as he grabs his bandaged forehead. Kanoko gives him a light scolding, reminding him that's exactly why he should stay in bed. Still confused, Big Brother looks around the unfamiliar room and asks where they are. Smiling warmly, Kanoko explains they're in the library's basement and that Miss Sayo was the one who saved them. Big Brother grips the edge of his blanket as he tries to process what he just heard. In disbelief, he quietly repeats that the stranger actually saved them. An automatic door slides open, hiss, drawing both of their attention. Kanoko happily greets Miss Sayo as she enters the room, and Sayo remarks that Big Brother is finally awake. She looks toward the bed. She says she's glad to see he has regained consciousness. Big Brother fixes Sayo with a guarded stare. Without hesitation, he demands to know who she is and why she chose to save them. He keeps pressing her, asking how she escaped the massive creature and what her real intentions are. Caught off guard by the barrage of questions, Sayo can only stumble over her words. Kanoko suddenly interrupts the tense exchange. She tells Big Brother that before anything else, he should thank the person who saved them. Looking him straight in the eye, Kanoko reminds Big Brother that they attacked Sayo first, yet she still risked her life to save them. That's exactly why they owe her their gratitude. He looks away with a conflicted expression. He argues that if he hadn't attacked first, Sayo might have harmed Kanoko, and insists he never asked to be rescued. Kanoko shoots him a stern glare without saying another word. After a brief silence, she firmly tells him to thank Sayo. Giving in at last, he lowers his head and quietly thanks her. Kanoko bows politely beside him, while Sayo quickly waves her hand and assures them there's no need to worry about it. As the tension fades, Sayo looks at the two of them and decides it's time for a proper introduction. She begins by explaining who she is. The room falls silent as Sayo shares her story. The two survivors slowly realize that she is an artificial person. With wide eyes, Kanoko realizes that's why Sayo is immune to crystallosis. Sayo nods, confirming that she's exactly right. Our girl explains that her mission is to search for survivors while purifying the pathogen responsible for crystallosis. She adds that, for now, her journey has led her to help out at this library. Hope flickers across Kanoko's face. She eagerly asks if that means there are still other survivors somewhere out in the world. Sayo lowers her gaze before delivering the painful truth. She quietly explains that, aside from the two of them, she only ever found one other survivor, and he's already gone. Big Brother sits silently in his bed, his expression clouded with doubt. Under his breath, he questions how much of Sayo's story they can really believe. Turning to Kanoko, Big Brother vents his frustration. He reminds her that he's told her countless times not to trust strangers, while Sayo watches the argument unfold in awkward silence. Sayo listens uneasily as Big Brother explains his doubts. He admits she's clearly immune to crystallosis, but claims he's never heard of anyone creating an artificial person. Kanoko calmly argues that Sayo's story has to be true. She points out that Sayo defeated the monster alone and recovered from her injuries almost instantly, leaving him speechless. Clutching his blanket, Big Brother shouts that it's impossible. Kanoko insists she saw Sayo defeat the monster by herself, while Sayo quietly stands by the wall with Ku beside her. Kanoko stands her ground, reminding Big Brother they'd both be dead if not for Miss Sayo. Worried the argument is getting out of hand, Sayo tries to gently calm them down. Just then, Ethan, the treaded library drone, rolls into the room with a meal cart. In a mechanical voice, it reminds everyone that this is a recovery room and asks them to keep the noise down. Kanoko quickly apologizes for the commotion. Meanwhile, Big Brother quietly watches as Ethan serves their meals from the cart. Ethan reminds everyone that even minor injuries take longer to heal without proper rest, then politely wishes them an enjoyable meal. Watching the door close, Big Brother asks what that machine was. Holding the food with a smile, Kanoko explains that it's Ethan, the librarian, and adds that both Ethan and Ku have been very kind to them. Sayo briefly finishes explaining her own background. She then shifts the conversation, saying she'd like to hear the survivor's story instead. Looking toward the hospital bed, Sayo says it's now their turn to talk. Kanoko listens quietly beside him as Sayo asks them to share their story. Our girl points out their unusual features, noticing their slit-shaped pupils and sharp horns. She admits they're unlike anyone she's met before. She hesitates before speaking about who they really are. Just as she is about to start, he stops her. He gently stops her, saying he'll explain it himself. Breaking the silence, Big Brother asks if Sayo knows that people infected with crystallosis don't truly disappear after they die. Sayo calmly replies that she's aware of the phenomenon. With a serious look, he leans forward and asks what happens to an unborn child when a pregnant woman becomes infected. Sayo thinks for a moment before answering. According to everything she knows, the child dies along with the mother. Still seated on the bed, he explains that while most unborn children die with their infected mothers, there are rare cases where the fetus continues to grow. The revelation leaves Sayo staring at him in stunned silence. He calmly reveals the truth: they were born from the body of a mother infected with crystallosis. The shocking confession leaves Sayo speechless. After a moment of thought, he points out that if artificial people like Sayo can exist, then people like them shouldn't be so hard to believe. Big Brother explains that their unusual birth is also why they don't need protective masks. They simply can't contract crystallosis, and Sayo listens without interrupting. As the weight of the revelation sinks in, Sayo hesitates. Since it directly concerns her mission, she quietly says there's something she has to ask. The moment Sayo begins asking about the source of crystallosis, Big Brother's expression hardens. Before Kanoko can stop him, he lunges forward and grabs Sayo by the collar. With his teeth clenched, he demands to know what she'll do if they really are the source. He angrily asks if she's planning to kill them. Still glaring at Sayo, Big Brother firmly declares that neither of them can catch crystallosis. Aside from that, he insists they're no different from any other human. Keeping a tight grip on Sayo's collar, he pins her against the doorway and insists they're human. Panicking, Kanoko rushes over and grabs his arm, trying to pull him back. Sayo remains silent, too surprised to react. Regret washes over her face as she quietly apologizes. She admits her choice of words was insensitive and poorly phrased. The guy lets out a frustrated sigh and turns his back on Sayo. As he walks away, Kanoko hurries after him, urging him to calm down. Kanoko apologizes to her on his behalf. She gently explains that Big Brother tends to lose his temper easily. Sayo enters the code on the electronic keypad and opens the sliding door. Reassuring them that everything is fine, she tells them to rest while she goes to get fresh bandages. Once outside, Sayo lets out a long sigh as the automatic door closes behind her. Alone in the quiet hallway, she finally has a moment to collect herself. Touching her chin, Sayo reflects on what just happened. She never expected to be met with such hostility and realizes there may be others who feel the same way. As she walks through the silent library corridor toward the storage room, Sayo can't stop thinking about the mysterious siblings. She wonders where they came from and what they're really searching for. Back in the medical room, Big Brother sits quietly on the edge of the bed while Kanoko remains beside him. Still struggling to understand the nuances of human emotion, Sayo decides she'll try talking to them again another time, hoping they'll eventually come to understand one another. Inside a storage room, our girl pulls a pouch of bandages from a medical kit. Ethan remarks that the siblings are clearly wary of Sayo. She quietly agrees while watching him gather the supplies. Sayo lowers her gaze to the bandage pouch in her hands. She reflects that if she only understood the siblings' goal, she could surely help them. Near the doorway, Sayo turns toward Ethan in surprise as he offers to speak with the siblings instead. Caught off guard, she hesitates before softly protesting. Ethan raises his mechanical arm and explains that, judging by what happened earlier, the siblings need some time to calm down. He waves his tiny mechanical claw and adds that he might have an easier time talking to the brother since Sayo was the one who drew his anger. Sayo lets out an awkward groan and glances away with a bead of sweat, realizing the library machine had overheard their entire argument. Ethan looks toward the room and points out that today is a particular day of the month. He continues, saying he is certain Sayo has a more important task to handle. A gentle smile appears on Sayo's face as the tension eases. She agrees that he is right and thanks him for the reminder. Sayo hands him the bandage pouch and says she will leave everything to him. Ethan takes the bag with his mechanical claw and reassures her that he has it under control. Beside the storage shelf, Sayo looks down at Ku and tells the little companion that it is time to go. Ku lets out a soft chirp from the shelf as the two prepare to head out. Meanwhile, Kanoko holds up a spoonful of food with a determined look and tells Isami that they went through all the trouble of making it, so he has to eat it. Isami averts his gaze with a deeply skeptical expression. He argues that there is no way to know whether the food has been tampered with. Kanoko faces him directly and thrusts out the spoon in frustration. She says she cannot believe him and scolds him for being so stubborn. With a sigh, Kanoko sits on a stool and decides to eat first. Isami immediately panics and steps off the medical bed to stop her, but quickly gives in and says he will test it himself. A bead of sweat runs down Isami's face as he studies the meal with a wary stare. He insists on eating it first to make sure it is safe. Isami lowers his gaze to the bowl in his lap, grips his spoon, and carefully scoops up a small bite. He cautiously brings the spoon to his mouth and takes his first bite, chewing in silence. Across from him, Kanoko sits with her own bowl and watches closely, waiting to see his reaction. After swallowing, Isami admits the food seems fine. Kanoko beams with satisfaction and teasingly reminds him that she told him so. Isami keeps his spoon in hand and fixes a guarded stare ahead. He admits they may not need to stay on constant alert around their hosts, but warns Kanoko not to trust them so easily. Kanoko quietly listens with her spoon raised as Isami continues his warning. He admits Sayo did save them, but insists they cannot rule out the possibility that they are being used for something. He lowers his gaze to his bowl and asks if Kanoko has forgotten what happened to them. She hesitates and starts to say she hasn't, but a sudden knock at the door cuts her off. Ethan rolls into the room with fresh medical supplies and announces that he has brought new bandages. Kanoko thanks him, then immediately asks what happened to Miss Sayo. Ethan explains that Sayo has other duties to attend to today, so he will be handling things in her place. As she wraps a fresh bandage around Isami's head, Kanoko curiously asks what those duties are. While Kanoko finishes bandaging his forehead, Isami asks if those duties involve purifying crystallosis. Ethan acknowledges the question, noting that he already knows about it. Kanoko smiles as she finishes the bandage and announces that it is done. Isami quietly thanks her before admitting he still does not understand what it means to purify the disease. With a skeptical glare, Isami argues that wiping out every trace of crystallosis is impossible. He wonders if Sayo plans to level the entire city to achieve it. Ethan explains what the purification actually involves. He tells the siblings that Sayo travels through the city, gathers the bodies of the infected, and gives them proper burials. Kanoko's eyes widen in shock as she asks if Sayo really collects the bodies one by one. Ethan confirms that she does, adding that Sayo has carried out that duty every day for 2,136 days since arriving at the facility. The scene cuts to a close-up of a hand resting on a telephone receiver. Ethan adds that Sayo has most likely carried out those duties for far longer than that. As Sayo quietly stands inside the facility, Ethan explains that she performs those duties to protect any survivors who may still be out there. He adds that she also does it to honor those who have already passed away. Seated together on the recovery bed, Isami and Kanoko listen in silence as Ethan explains that nothing matters more to Sayo than finding survivors. Ethan continues defending his companion, insisting that Sayo has always been devoted to protecting survivors. He doubts the thought of using people would ever cross her mind. Isami quietly realizes that the library drone had overheard their earlier conversation. Ethan calmly replies that his audio sensors are quite sensitive. Isami falls silent with his hands resting on his lap while Kanoko quietly watches. Facing the siblings, Ethan advises them not to rush to judgment. Instead, he suggests they see everything with their own eyes first. Isami and Kanoko listen with widened eyes as Ethan explains that today is burial day. He offers to take them to the cremation center if they wish to see it themselves. Later, a deep mechanical rumble fills the facility as a transport elevator descends through a massive vertical shaft lined with towering concrete walls. The elevator's display lights up, revealing they have reached basement level 85. As the machinery hums around them, Kanoko quietly remarks on just how deep underground the facility extends. Kanoko stares in awe from the glass railing as the sheer scale of the facility sinks in. She realizes the entire place is a cemetery, and Ethan quietly confirms that she is right while Isami watches in silence. She gazes across the vast elevator shaft as countless levels pass by. With a heavy mechanical clunk, the elevator reaches its destination. The doors slide open, and Ethan leads the way into the dim corridor with Isami and Kanoko close behind. The trio enters a vast underground chamber where endless rows of stone burial pillars disappear into the darkness. Holding a small white box beside a transport cart, Sayo turns at the sound of approaching footsteps. Surprised to see them, she asks if something happened, remarking that it is unusual for anyone to come this far underground. Ethan explains that the siblings wanted to see Sayo at work, which is why he brought them here. Still holding the box, Sayo calmly acknowledges his explanation and turns to Isami and Kanoko. Isami reaches out and rests a hand on one of the rectangular boxes. With a serious look, he asks if they are all graves. Sayo nods while holding the white box. She confirms that they are, explaining that everyone who died in the disaster was laid to rest there. Kanoko lowers her gaze to the countless stacked boxes, quietly realizing that each one holds the remains of a victim. The group falls silent among the endless rows of graves. After a long pause, Isami finally asks Sayo if she truly intends to bury every single person. He lowers his gaze with a skeptical expression and presses the issue. He asks if she truly believes a task like that can ever be completed. Sayo looks toward the siblings with a calm expression. She quietly admits that she does not know the answer. Standing beneath the vast ceiling with burial boxes surrounding her, Sayo explains that everything she is doing may ultimately be meaningless. She reflects on her purpose. Sayo says that knowing she exists at the end of humanity's long, unbroken history, she cannot bring herself to disrespect the people who came before her. Silence hangs over the endless rows of graves as Sayo shares her true feelings. She admits she calls it her mission, but in reality, she does it mostly for her own peace of mind. After a long moment of reflection, Isami turns his back and starts to walk away. Kanoko watches in surprise and calls after her brother, while Sayo silently follows his actions with her eyes. Isami suddenly stops and asks Sayo if it would be alright for them to help with her work. Sayo looks at him in surprise as Ku peeks out from behind her shoulder. A warm smile spreads across Sayo's face as Ku rests against her neck. She happily tells the siblings that she would be grateful for their help. With quiet smiles, the group begins working together. Beneath the vast underground burial vault, Isami, Kanoko, Sayo, and Ethan join forces to continue the solemn task. Later, the group takes a break around a table in a quiet room. Sitting across from the siblings, Sayo sincerely thanks them for helping her that day. Our girl smiles warmly as the day's work comes to an end. She thanks the siblings, saying their help allowed her to finish the burials much sooner than she expected. Kanoko quickly waves it off with a humble smile. She says it was nothing compared to everything Sayo has done for them. Isami lowers his gaze in quiet reflection, silently admitting to himself that Kanoko is right. He steps forward and bows his head to Sayo in apology for how rudely he treated her. He sincerely thanks her once again for saving their lives, as Kanoko watches from the side. Caught completely off guard, Sayo's eyes go wide, and a bead of sweat rolls down her cheek. She stammers out a flustered response, unsure how to react. The mood settles as Isami sits back down beside his sister. He then says there is one more thing they would like to ask Sayo. Sayo notices the small electronic device in Isami's gloved hand and curiously asks what it is. Isami presses a button on the device, and a sharp click echoes through the room. He explains that he found a broadcast in the communication logs of an abandoned shelter and that this device contains a copy of the recording. Static crackles through the quiet room as the recording begins to play. Sayo listens in silence while a voice introduces himself as Usa, explaining that the broadcast is meant for any fellow survivors who might still be alive. She listens in disbelief as the recorded voice reveals that he was born from the body of a woman infected with crystallosis. The voice explains that, for reasons unknown, he was born with a natural resistance to crystallosis, allowing him to survive far longer than he believes he deserves. Kanoko listens quietly as the message continues. The speaker says there are probably no ordinary humans left alive, but believes others like him may still exist. The voice announces that he is heading to location 4 in District 13, hoping any unseen comrades will find him there. It explains that District 13 is believed to be one of the places where the disaster began. He hopes it may hold clues about the origin of the executioners. The speaker explains that, for those resistant to crystallosis, the executioners are the only threat left. So he has chosen to risk everything by traveling to the outbreak zone. A bead of sweat rolls down Sayo's cheek as she listens to the final words of the recording. The speaker says he can only hope someone hears his message and comes to join him before the player clicks off. Isami explains that the broadcast was programmed to repeat at regular intervals across shelters of the same type. He says the broadcast came from someone named Usa, who planned to travel to location 4 in District 13. That is why he and Kanoko have been heading there as well. As Ethan quietly listens, Isami explains that the journey has been filled with danger. Even so, they somehow managed to survive every obstacle along the way. He admits they still have to cross 3 more cities before reaching their destination. With a somber expression, he says they have a long road ahead, and their chances of making it are slim. Isami finally makes his request. He asks Sayo if she would be willing to help them reach their destination. Kanoko's eyes widen, a bead of sweat forming on her face as she stares at her brother in surprise. He honestly admits that he has no idea whether Usa is still alive, pointing out that the broadcast was recorded around 10 years ago. Isami clenches his fists on his lap and speaks with quiet determination. Even if the chances are slim, he says this is the last hope they have left. After a brief silence, Isami looks up at Sayo with a somber expression. He admits his request is selfish. Sayo says she understands the request. Sayo's unexpected reply leaves both him and Kanoko stunned. A gentle smile spreads across Sayo's face. Without a moment's hesitation, she tells them she will accompany them on their journey. Startled, Isami questions her decision. He points out that it cannot be that simple since Sayo still has her own mission to fulfill, while Kanoko watches in surprise. Sayo explains that her mission is to purify crystallosis and protect any survivors. She adds that investigating the source of the executioner outbreaks is also part of that mission. She tells the siblings that traveling with them may also lead to valuable information. Resting a hand over her tie, Sayo smiles reassuringly. She says that whenever someone asks for help, she and Ku are always ready to lend a hand however they can. Sayo glances back at Ku with a gentle smile, asking for confirmation. Perched against her back, the little companion happily chirps in agreement. Isami and Kanoko sit in stunned silence, taking in Sayo's unexpected decision. Kanoko suddenly breaks into a bright smile and excitedly thanks Sayo from the bottom of her heart. Beside her, Isami finally relaxes and quietly admits that Sayo is truly remarkable. Isami extends his gloved hand across the table, realizing he has yet to properly introduce himself. With a gentle smile, Isami introduces himself by name. Sayo warmly shakes his hand and introduces herself as Ushimitsu Saya. Their hands meet in a firm handshake, sealing their new partnership. Isami says he looks forward to working together on the journey ahead. Sayo stands in a worn room with large, open windows, Ethan remarks that it looks like she has finished packing. Seo calmly confirms that she has. She explains that everything important has already been loaded onto the vehicle. Once this final book retrieval is complete, she plans to set off. Ethan calmly says he understands. Seo admits they cut things a little close, but is glad she stayed long enough to help him and see everything through. Ethan announces that this will be the final book. The machine adds that retrieving it will complete the return of every borrowed volume. Seo smiles softly and agrees, pausing for a moment as the thought sinks in. Her gaze drifts toward the window as she reflects on her departure. Now that it's finally time to leave the library, she admits she'll miss it. She lingers by the doorway, quietly adding that the library had become an incredibly cozy place. Ethan explains that the library was meant to be a place where citizens could relax, and says it's honored Seo came to feel the same way. Ethan announces they've reached their destination, and figures the last book is somewhere inside, suggesting they split up to search. Seo steps into the room and stops in front of a tall, weathered bookshelf packed with books. She spots the Encyclopedia of Life on Earth on one of the upper shelves and quietly realizes she's found it. After pulling it down, she carefully flips through the pages. Her gloved hand rests against an open page as she studies a collection of detailed fish illustrations. Seo stares at the book with quiet fascination. The illustrations are so beautiful that she can't help admiring them. Ethan rolls over, admitting he had no luck searching his side. He then asks Seo if she found anything. Ethan calls out to Miss Ushimitsu, snapping Seo out of her thoughts with a startled yelp. She quickly shuts the book and tells him she found it. Ethan looks at the book in her hands and asks if she's interested in that encyclopedia. Holding the book close, Seo admits that she is. She explains that she once visited a museum. She recalls someone at the museum teaching her about animals. Ever since then, she's been fascinated by them. After a brief pause, Ethan speaks again. Seo hands him the book, saying she's relieved they found it intact. Ethan accepts the volume and formally thanks her. Seo says it's about time they headed back, explaining that she doesn't want to keep the other two waiting. After securing the book, Ethan agrees. Outside the library, Seo stands beside the open door of a transport vehicle. Near the open rear doors, Isami and Kanoko wait together, ready for the journey ahead. Kanoko smiles warmly and admits they only just met. Even so, she sincerely thanks their host for taking such good care of them during their stay. Ethan politely replies that the pleasure was his, adding that he truly enjoyed spending time with them. Turning toward the vehicle, Ethan asks if Isami's injuries have healed. Isami confirms they have and says it's all thanks to Ethan, adding that he owes him a great deal. Standing beside the vehicle, Seo tells Ku it's time to go. The little companion happily chirps its name and shares one last farewell with Ethan's mechanical arm. Ethan calls Seo's name, prompting her to turn toward the drone. Extending a thin mechanical arm, Ethan offers her a neatly wrapped package. Seo recognizes its shape immediately and realizes it's the book from earlier. Ethan explains that the encyclopedia is a replica of a book created during the era when humans still lived alongside other forms of life. Ethan explains that humanity lost its connection to the natural world after the Great War. Because of that, the animals depicted in its pages may no longer exist anywhere they can be seen. Ethan says that if the book still interests her despite everything, then he would be happy. Caught off guard, Seo flinches in surprise before hurriedly insisting that it changes nothing. She happily accepts the gift, and Ethan says he's glad to hear it. Ethan then explains the special checkout terms. A unique exception has been made, giving the book an indefinite return period. He tells Seo she can bring it back after safely escorting the two survivors, or wait until her mission is complete. Either option is perfectly acceptable. He simply asks that if she ever returns to this area, she stop by the library and return the book. Ethan extends his mechanical arms and gently assures her that the library will always be there, waiting. Seo smiles warmly. She thanks Ethan from the bottom of her heart and accepts the wrapped encyclopedia, promising that one day she'll return. Holding the encyclopedia tightly against her chest, Seo looks back at the library. She quietly says goodbye and asks Ethan to take care of himself. Ethan promises that he will. He then offers one final farewell, praying that all of them remain safe and healthy. As the vehicle prepares to depart, Ethan wishes everyone a safe journey. Seo wears a gentle smile from the front seat as the door shuts behind her with a loud slam. Ku quietly watches beside her while their next journey begins. The engine rumbles to life as the vehicle pulls away from the library. Kanoko leans out the back to wave goodbye while Ethan raises a mechanical arm in return. The truck gradually disappears down the empty street, leaving the lonely library behind amid the ruined city. Standing alone at the foot of the entrance steps, Ethan quietly watches as the travelers disappear into the distance. He lowers his mechanical claw and retracts his arms before slowly turning back toward the library. The drone begins climbing the wide concrete steps toward the entrance. As the months turn into years, Ethan will continue faithfully watching over the library, patiently waiting for the day the lone girl returns. A large metal kettle rests atop a small block-shaped stove, its fire crackling beneath. Steam pours from the spout as a soft whistle fills the room. A voice admits that the situation is more surprising than expected. The travelers take a break inside a worn concrete ruin. Isami sits across from Sayo while Kanoko quietly rests behind her with a teddy bear in her arms. Curious, Sayo asks if he can really detect executioners. Sayo lifts the kettle and pours a hot drink into a small cup. She explains that if they can truly sense executioners, they should be able to continue their journey while avoiding unnecessary danger. Isami points towards Sayo and asks if she can also perform the clicking technique she demonstrated earlier. Sayo hands him a warm cup before explaining the limits of her ability. She can only locate areas with high infection levels or dense concentrations of crystallosis crystals. She admits that her own detection range is fairly limited. He realizes their abilities are similar, though not identical. Meanwhile, Kanoko cheerfully balances her teddy bear on her head. A thought suddenly crosses Sayo's mind. Resting a hand near her chin, she recalls the circumstances of their first meeting. She asks why the siblings were resting in an area filled with crystallosis miasma if they could detect danger. Isami quietly listens with his cup in hand. Isami looks straight at her and reminds her that his ability is not automatic. He has to consciously focus before he can sense approaching threats. He explains that they had only stopped to rest. By the time they woke up, they were already trapped in the dangerous area. As Sayo quietly sips her drink, she acknowledges how easily things had gone wrong. As she listens, he reflects that overconfidence can be fatal. Looking off to the side, Isami admits that this detection ability is the only reason he is still alive. The story shifts to a memory. With his eyes closed in concentration, a younger Isami scans the area until someone asks what he can sense. Opening one eye, young Isami reports that the area is clear. He cannot sense any executioners nearby. Wearing a heavy gas mask, Isami's father nods in approval. He tells his son they can move, but warns him to stay alert. Young Isami answers with a determined look, promising he won't let his guard down. The memory follows the father and son through the ruined city. They make their way down a narrow alley, climb a tall metal ladder, and enter a facility through a large mechanical hatch. Inside a storage vault packed with shelves and supplies, Isami waits while his father gathers provisions. Handing over a bag of canned food and energy bars, his father says it should last them a week. Holding a teddy bear in his lap, Isami quietly points out that the supplies will barely last a week. Frustrated, Isami wonders why they have to gather food for those jerks too. His father adjusts his backpack and gently corrects him. As the group's food procurement team, collecting supplies is simply their responsibility under the agreement. His father realizes Ayukawa's group will be leaving soon. With that in mind, there is no point starting a fight. A heavy thought crosses Isami's mind. He realizes this unfair arrangement exists only because of Kanoko and himself. His father kneels to meet his eyes and quietly asks if Isami has forgotten what he always tells him. He explains that he can give everything he has because his children are with him. Thanks to Isami's detection ability, they can safely gather food for everyone. Ruffling his son's hair, he tells Isami he is counting on him. Later, he sets a large backpack on the table. He announces that the food inside is meant to feed the 5 of them. Standing behind the table, a guy sprays the supplies with a chemical mist before welcoming them back and praising their work. Another survivor scans the food with a handheld detector, which confirms the infection level is 0%. Watching the inspection, Isami's father realizes that they already knew the supplies were safe. Standing beside his son, Isami's father stares at Ayukawa and says that if the food is clean enough for him, he should finally take off his gas mask. Ayukawa remarks that Isami's father never gives up. Even so, he refuses to remove his mask, unwilling to risk exposing himself in front of the child. Isami glares at him in anger, insulted by the distrust. Ayukawa insists he is not that foolish. Before Isami can lash out, his father quickly pulls him back and steps in front of him to defuse the situation. Ayukawa reminds them of their agreement. Isami's family gathers food, while his group provides shelter. Until the Python project is complete, both sides are expected to uphold their end of the deal. He adds that neither side interferes in the other's affairs because those are the agreed terms. Holding Isami back, his father quietly admits that's true. Ayukawa's tone hardens as he warns that anyone who breaks the agreement will face the consequences. He tells them not to forget it. The memory shifts to another part of the facility. A man in a knit beanie sits in a dim control room, focused on two glowing monitors as his fingers race across the keyboard. Ayukawa enters and removes his gas mask, asking how the work is progressing. The technician spins around and replies that everything is going smoothly. Holding his mask at his side, Ayukawa quietly says that if they can endure a little longer, they will finally escape this place. Leaning back as cigarette smoke fills the room, the technician bitterly remarks that every survivor was male. With no future left, all they can do is wait for humanity to disappear. He explains that the massive vehicle below was built to prevent exactly that fate. It is called the Python. The full scale of the Python comes into view, a gigantic armored vehicle equipped with a snowplow blade and multiple gun turrets. Tragically, everyone involved in the project died before it could be completed, including his parents and his own wife and daughter. The memory shifts again as Isami enters a passcode into a wall panel. The security door slides open, revealing Isami and his father just as young Kanoko runs out to greet them. Kanoko happily rushes into her father's arms. Smiling warmly, he welcomes her home while Isami quietly watches the reunion. Patting Kanoko's head, Isami's father tells her they're finally home. When he asks if she behaved while they were away, she eagerly nods yes. With a smile, Isami hands the teddy bear back to his sister and thanks her for looking after their home during their trips. Kanoko's face lights up with excitement. Kanoko proudly raises the teddy bear above her head. As she celebrates, Isami turns to his father, who looks back and asks what is on his mind. Thinking back on their latest supply run, Isami says the shelter they visited seemed much larger than expected. Next time, he wants to explore deeper inside in case they find something valuable. His father agrees with a smile, hoping they might uncover something useful. Just then, Kanoko excitedly calls out to her big brother from across the room. With a warm smile, Kanoko reminds Isami of an important promise. They were supposed to play together today. Their father chuckles, knowing exactly what she means. The memory shifts to the large shelter Isami mentioned earlier. As he and his father walk through a long industrial corridor, a faint sound suddenly catches Isami's attention. Placing a hand on a metal door, Isami says he can hear something inside. His father immediately opens it, revealing the source, a broadcast still playing. Inside, they find a large computer terminal surrounded by monitors and equipment. Through the static, a recorded voice announces that the message is meant for any survivors who might still be alive. Both freeze in shock as the speaker introduces himself as Usa. The recording then reveals that he was born from the corpse of a woman infected with crystallosis. As his father checks the terminal, the broadcast reaches its end. The speaker says he can only hope someone hears his message and comes to find him the very broadcast that first led the siblings to Usa. Examining the system logs, Isami's father discovers the message was recorded over 5 years ago. Even so, the speaker's unusual origin is strikingly similar to Isami and Kanoko's. A realization dawns on him. If that's true, then Usa could still be alive somewhere. Isami looks up at his father in disbelief. Meeting his son's eyes, he quietly confirms the possibility. Hope fills Isami's face as he realizes they're not alone. There are others like them out in the world. His father's expression turns serious. Finding Usa is one thing, but reaching him means crossing vast stretches of crystallosis miasma. While copying the recording onto a small device, Isami's father says they've finally found a goal. Even so, he warns that they cannot rush into it. Resting a hand on Isami's shoulder, he suggests sticking to their current routine until Ayukawa's group leaves the shelter. Once they're gone, he explains, the three of them will have all the time they need to plan a safe journey to Usa. Isami listens with quiet determination and raises his fist. His father asks if he can endure their current situation until then, and Isami answers without hesitation. The two seal their promise with a fist bump. Proudly, Isami's father tells him he's counting on him. Kanoko runs over with her teddy bear, smiling from ear to ear. Their father gently ruffles her hair while Isami watches the heartwarming moment with a smile. The memory shifts to another part of the facility. With his mask off, Ayukawa quietly watches a technician finish the final adjustments on a complex control panel, reflecting on the project's final stage. Back in the storage room, Isami's father says this will be the last time they gather food for Ayukawa's group. As he disinfects the supplies, Ayukawa quietly thanks the family for everything they've done. Ayukawa admits he once believed his group would starve before reaching their goal. Thanks to Isami's family, they made it this far. Isami's father shoots him a cold glare. He says this is also the last time he'll have to listen to Ayukawa's smug remarks. Their deal is over. Standing beside Isami, he declares that once Ayukawa's group leaves, the shelter will finally belong to them. Father and son turn to leave. He calmly tells them to take care. Then, without warning, Ayukawa quietly draws a handgun and aims it at their backs. a gunshot shatters the silence. The bullet tears into Isami's father's chest, leaving Isami frozen in horror. Panic takes over as Isami screams for his father, unable to believe what just happened. Clutching his bleeding chest, Isami's father grits through the pain and shoves Isami away to keep him out of the line of fire. Holding his wound, Isami's father desperately orders him to take Kanoko and run. Terrified, Isami can only stare at him in disbelief. Collapsing against the wall, Isami's father clutches his bleeding chest and orders him to leave. He promises they'll meet again later. Fighting back his grief, Isami turns and runs. A masked man blocks the exit with twin blades, declaring that Isami isn't going anywhere. Clicking his tongue, Isami charges straight at him. Launching himself into the air, Isami drives a flying knee into the man's face, sending him crashing to the ground. Stepping past the fallen guard, Ayukawa approaches. Glaring up at him, Isami's father bitterly says he never imagined Ayukawa could be such a monster. Ayukawa coldly replies that he could never allow imitations capable of threatening humanity to live freely. He reveals that he decided to kill them the moment Isami's father chose to raise the two children. Raising his handgun, Ayukawa looks down at him and says he has always been too soft. Another gunshot rings out. The bullet strikes Isami's father, who slumps lifelessly against the wall. Lowering his weapon, Ayukawa thanks him for all the years he spent gathering food for their group. Ayukawa helps his injured companion to his feet and orders everyone to leave. Behind them, Isami's father's body remains motionless against the wall. Meanwhile, Isami bursts through a metal door and frantically calls out, asking if Kanoko is safe. Kanoko sits quietly on the floor, hugging her teddy bear. Looking up at Isami, she innocently asks what is wrong. Without answering, Isami rushes to a large bookshelf and shoves it aside, shouting that they have to run. Kanoko watches in confusion. A hidden passage is revealed behind the shelf. Desperately, Isami tells Kanoko there's no time and urges her to follow him. Kanoko grabs his arm and asks him to wait. Looking up anxiously, she asks what will happen to their father. Isami falls silent, unable to answer. Forcing a reassuring smile, Isami places his hands on her shoulders and tells her their father will catch up soon. He urges her not to worry. Holding Kanoko's hand, Isami leads her into the hidden passage. As they run, she looks back one last time, clutching her teddy bear. As they race through the corridor, Isami desperately clings to his father's last words. He keeps telling himself everything will be okay, that they will meet again. Back in the room, Isami's father's body remains slumped against the wall. Then, one of his fingers suddenly twitches as the scene shifts to the massive armored python resting inside the hangar. In the control room, the guard Isami knocked down gets back to his feet, rubbing his bruised face. Beside him, Ayukawa supports the injured man, while the technician watches in silence. Ayukawa announces that everyone is finally here and orders the group to move out. The technician adjusts his goggles and acknowledges the command. The technician glances over his shoulder and asks if Ayukawa killed the targets. Ayukawa calmly admits the children escaped, leaving the technician stunned. Determined to finish the job, Ayukawa orders a pursuit. The technician quickly checks the automatic door logs to trace the siblings' escape route. The system identifies the last door that was opened. After checking the map, he concludes the siblings escaped through West Gate number 12. Before they can move out, an emergency warning suddenly appears on the main monitor. The reactor has detected a critical malfunction. Seeing the alert, Ayukawa decides to inspect the reactor himself. Inside the Python's cockpit, Ayukawa orders Niyama to accompany him while telling the technician to prepare for departure at any moment. The two head into the lower maintenance corridor. Before entering, Ayukawa hands Niyama a weapon, telling him to be prepared for anything. With the weapon over his shoulder, Niyama climbs down a metal ladder into the maintenance shaft. Ayukawa watches him descend, reminding him that caution is never a bad thing. As Niyama reaches the bottom, he grumbles about the terrible timing of the reactor problem. Suddenly, a shadow appears behind him. A powerful blow slams into Niyama without warning, making him cry out in pain. Hearing the impact, Ayukawa spins around in shock. A metal pipe clatters across the floor as Ayukawa recoils in surprise. The attacker is revealed to be Isami's father, still alive despite his gunshot wounds. As he tightens the chokehold, he bitterly admits he wished they could have parted ways without becoming enemies. Filled with regret, Isami's father realizes he had been too soft. Determined to end it, he brings his weapon down with all his strength. Blood runs down his face as he glares at Ayukawa. He says that anyone who targets children must be ready to face the consequences. Ayukawa staggers back, clutching his bleeding head. Closing the distance, Isami's father coldly declares that Ayukawa is finally getting what he deserves. Elsewhere, Isami and Kanoko hide beneath a maze of ruined pipes. Sensing her fear, Isami gently reassures her that everything will be okay. Despite his words, panic fills Isami's mind. He can't stop wondering what will happen if their father never returns or if those men find them first. Sensing his fear, Kanoko leans against him and hugs her teddy bear. Isami closes his eyes and tries to steady himself. Then a loud metallic clang echoes through the ruins. He instantly covers Kanoko's mouth and turns toward the sound. Carefully peeking over a pile of debris, Isami stares toward the source of the noise. What he sees leaves him frozen in shock. A battered figure emerges from the shadows. Clutching his bleeding chest, Isami's father staggers forward. The moment Isami recognizes him, he cries out in relief. Breathing heavily, Isami's father calls out to Isami and Kanoko. As they run to him, he smiles, relieved to see they are both safe. His strength finally gives out, and he slides down the wall. Despite his condition, he smiles and says he's grateful they made it. Seeing his father's wounds, Isami insists they need to treat them immediately. Beside him, Kanoko breaks down in tears, crying for her father. Looking away, Isami's father quietly tells them it's already too late. He has been infected as well. Holding his wound, he tells them to listen carefully. From this point on, they will have to survive on their own. With both children gathered beside him, Isami's father gives them one final instruction. Find the city where Usa is. Even now, he manages a gentle smile. He tells them everything will be okay and asks them not to look so sad. Resting a hand on Kanoko's head, he asks her to take care of her big brother, joking that Isami is always too quick to pick a fight. Finally, he turns to Isami and entrusts Kanoko to him. Confident that he's taught his son everything he needs to know, he says he believes they'll be just fine. Smiling warmly, Isami's father looks at his son one last time and tells him he's counting on him. Isami wipes away his tears and raises a clenched fist. With renewed determination, he accepts his father's final wish. His father smiles proudly and raises his own fist in return, telling Isami that he's truly his son. Their fists meet one last time. Sealing their final promise, Isami's father tells the two children to survive, no matter what. An emergency alarm suddenly blares throughout the facility. As the reactor enters a critical state, the automated system orders everyone to evacuate. Lying on the floor, Ayukawa bitterly realizes that a dying man managed to ruin everything. Warning messages flood the control screens as the countdown begins. The system announces that the reactor will soon become uninhabitable. Watching the timer tick down, Ayukawa quietly admits that he was the one who had been too soft. Blood runs down Ayukawa's face as he struggles to breathe. Defeated, he can't accept that everything is ending like this. The reactor warnings continue to echo through the facility. Barely able to stand, Ayukawa is haunted by one final thought, a world where those imitations are free to live. Slumped against a metal door, Ayukawa takes his final breaths. Filled with regret, he believes he should have killed the children the day they were born. Far above the ruined city, towering industrial structures fade into the distance. Below them, Isami and Kanoko walk side by side through the empty streets, beginning their journey alone. Looking at his little sister with a gentle smile, Isami promises that everything will be okay. No matter what happens, he'll always protect her. Wiping away her tears, Kanoko looks up at him and softly says she'll do the same. She takes Isami's hand and promises to protect her big brother, no matter what. Back in the present, Seo notices Isami lost in thought and asks if he's okay. Kanoko calls out to him, snapping him back to reality. He quietly says he's fine. Isami gently pats Kanoko's head and reassures her that nothing is wrong. He tells her he just drifted off for a moment. Looking into the rippling surface of her cup, Seo remarks that Isami's ability is still a mystery. She wonders if it exists for a greater purpose. She suggests that his sensing ability may be an adaptation humanity developed to survive the crystallosis disaster. Isami silently considers her theory. Her words linger in Isami's mind. As Kanoko stands to stretch, he takes a sip of his drink, smiles softly, and admits that Seo really is remarkable. Kanoko happily flips through an open encyclopedia, excitedly pointing at the detailed animal illustrations. She calls Ku over to look, showing an animal with horns just like hers, before eagerly pointing out another creature that looks just like the little companion. A gentle smile crosses Isami's face as he watches his sister, remarking that she really seems to like the book. Seo glances over and quietly says she's happy to see Kanoko enjoying it. Curious, Isami asks whether most of the creatures in the encyclopedia have already gone extinct. Seo confirms they have, explaining that they apparently disappeared because of the Great War. His expression turns thoughtful as Isami lowers his gaze. He recalls that many people once believed those dangerous monsters appeared to punish humanity for its past sins. Seo's eyes widen as the pieces suddenly fall into place. She realizes that's exactly why the monsters came to be known as executioners. As the vehicle rolls onward, a voice reflects on that old belief, calling it foolish since the Great War had taken place more than 1,000 years earlier. Inside the moving vehicle, Isami points out that the encyclopedia is nothing more than a record of animals from the distant past. Sayo nods before asking why he brought it up. Turning toward the window, Isami quietly admits he has been thinking about humanity's future. Looking back at the disaster and everything that followed, he wonders whether mankind will survive long enough. Sayo listens in silence as his words sink in. Isami wonders whether humanity will endure long enough for these tragedies to one day become nothing more than distant history. Sayo stays silent for a brief moment before calmly offering her agreement, confirming that his thought is correct. Sitting inside the moving vehicle, Sayo reflects internally on her journey. She remembers meeting Isami and Kanoko, thinking to herself that after finding the two siblings, she decided they would all forge ahead together. Sayo's internal thoughts continue as she realizes that despite their shared determination, there is absolutely no guarantee that a viable path even exists ahead of them. The perspective shifts to the vehicle driving deeper into a large, dimly lit industrial corridor. Sayo notes that they have come pretty deep underground, navigating a subterranean network lined with structural panels and emergency lighting. Inside the front cabin of the vehicle, Sayo looks ahead and explains that the area up next is the Lifeline circulation network. She points out that the entire facility is fully automated, noting that because of this setup, human beings rarely ever come down to this specific location. The travelers arrive at a massive, completely sealed metal barrier featuring a large glowing monitor display. Sayo stands outside near the transport vehicle alongside Isami and Kanoko to inspect the area, explaining that these protective doors were sealed immediately when the disaster first happened. Isami reasons that this automatic lockdown is why there isn't much damage from the executioners down here. Sayo confirms his thought, admitting she originally figured this route would be their absolute best option to travel between cities. Isami observes the massive barrier and notes that they are locked out from the looks of it, since the facility is completely sealed off after all. Sayo stands quietly alongside the two siblings in silence. She then shifts her gaze to the side. Isami calls out to Miss Sayo as she walks away from the group. They watch quietly as Sayo approaches a heavy metal security door. Sayo stands directly in front of the electronic wall terminal and looks down at her companion. She asks Ku if it can take care of the locking system, prompting the small creature to chirp in ready agreement. A protective panel beneath the keypad pops open, allowing a small connection cable to click securely into the maintenance port. Ku focuses its efforts entirely on the terminal, causing the electronic device to emit a rapid succession of rhythmic beeps as it overrides the security network. The terminal lets out one final beep as its display changes to show the barrier has been unlocked. Smiling with relief, Sayo gently cradles Ku in her hands and thanks the little companion for its help. As Sayo reaches for the handle, she realizes the main gate would take a long time to open. She suggests trying a smaller nearby door first in case it leads to the same place. Isami quickly agrees, and the group moves forward. Watching the pair work together, Isami admits they're pretty amazing. Kanoko eagerly praises Ku, and Sayo smiles, saying she always relies on the little companion. The trio heads down a concrete stairwell into the dim underground facility. Reaching the bottom first, Sayo suddenly stops after spotting an illuminated sign above a doorway. As she reads the sign, Sayo realizes a metro line once ran beneath this facility. Turning back to the siblings, Sayo asks if they should take a look inside. The group enters the underground metro station, walking through a broad corridor lined with pipes, overhead panels, and open passageways as they cautiously explore the abandoned structure. Without warning, a series of electronic beeps echoes through the station. An automated announcement suddenly fills the station, identifying 3 potential passengers before welcoming them aboard the Aqualine Metro. The unexpected greeting leaves the group staring in surprise. A small treaded robot, wearing a station cap, rolls toward the travelers. It politely introduces itself as the station attendant assigned to the metro station. The station attendant asks whether the group is here for a facility tour or to ride the subway. Still trying to process what he just heard, Isami wonders if the subway is actually still operating after all these years. The attendant confirms that it is. As part of the city Lifeline circulation network, the subway remains fully operational to transport essential supplies. The robot goes on to explain that ordinary civilians can only use the direct routes between cities. However, the trio is free to ride the subway without restriction. Sayo quietly reflects on what she's learned. Relieved, she realizes her theory was correct. The disaster never reached this deep into the underground network. Amazed by their luck, Isami admits this is more than he ever expected. He asks Seo what they should do next, and after a moment's thought, she agrees it's a huge opportunity. Seo tells the siblings they should take advantage of the chance to ride the subway. Kanoko eagerly cheers at the idea while Isami nods in agreement. The attendant acknowledges their decision and confirms 3 passengers. It then offers another option, a special sea road tour, and asks if they'd be interested. Curious, Kanoko repeats the words, sea road tour. The attendant confirms that's correct as Sayo and Isami listen with interest. The robot explains that an ocean tunnel is connected to the station. Visitors on the tour can see relics from the Great War and even observe rare living creatures that still exist in the outside world. The mention of living creatures leaves Seo and Isami speechless. Before either of them can respond, Kanoko beams with excitement and eagerly says they'd love to join the tour. Kanoko excitedly tells Sayo that she's never seen the ocean before. Smiling back, Sayo admits she's never seen it either and can't wait to experience it. Sayo asks the station attendant if their vehicle can be transported as well. The robot confirms that the train includes a freight car and assures her it will arrange to load the vehicle on board. The attendant informs them the train will depart in 1 hour and 2 minutes, reminding them not to be late before offering to send the coordinates. Seo checks the terminal and nods, saying she understands. Turning to the siblings, she says she'll head back to retrieve the transport vehicle and asks them to board the train first. Isami thanks her, and the two agree before saying their goodbyes. The station attendant leads the siblings through a quiet underground corridor, guiding them deeper into the automated transit facility. The robot rolls onto the platform, stopping beside a sleek metro train waiting at the station. Isami and Kanoko follow behind, looking up at the impressive vehicle. Staring at the massive train, Kanoko excitedly says it's so cool. The attendant boards first and politely reminds them to watch their step. Inside the remarkably well-preserved passenger car, the attendant tells the siblings they may sit wherever they like. With a bright smile, Kanoko asks if they can sit by the window. Isami smiles back and happily agrees. Seated by the window, Kanoko glances toward the door with a worried look. She quietly tells Isami that Miss Sayo and Ku are taking longer than expected to return. A moment later, Kanoko excitedly spots Seo through the window. Carrying her travel pack, Seo walks along the platform as the siblings happily watch her approach. Isami immediately asks if everything went smoothly with transporting the vehicle. Stepping into the passenger car, Sayo apologizes for the delay, explaining that opening the massive facility door took longer than expected. Before anyone can reply, the station's automated announcement echoes through the train, thanking everyone for riding the Aqualine Metro. Holding Ku in her arms, Sayo quietly listens as the announcement states that the train will depart at 12 on the direct city line, with its destination set for RE4, 21st District. With a sharp mechanical hiss, the passenger doors slide shut. A final announcement declares the train's departure and notes that it will make a stop as part of the tour. The train lurches forward, its wheels clattering along the tracks. Curious, Kanoko presses against the window and watches the station race past in a blur, captivated by the train's speed. The metro train roars through the vast underground tunnel. Peering into the darkness outside, Kanoko quietly says she can't see anything at all. Isami smiles and reminds her they're deep underground. The station attendant returns, pushing a large serving cart down the aisle. It warmly asks if the passengers would like a bento for the journey, leaving Isami to quietly ask what a bento is. The attendant explains that a bento is a portable boxed meal, adding that it has long been an essential part of train travel. The robot proudly adds that the meals are prepared at the station's automated cell culture facility, assuring the group they're both fresh and delicious. Interested, Sayo asks if there's a spicy option. The attendant recommends the station's signature Aqualine curry. The attendant hands Sayo a box of mega spicy seafood curry. She gratefully accepts the meal and thanks the robot. The robot asks what the siblings would like. Kanoko chooses the same curry with medium spice, while Isami requests something without any spice. The attendant happily confirms their orders. Looking down at her boxed meal, Sayo smiles to herself. It's been a long time since she last had one of these fancy bentos, and she knows the wait will be worth it. Following the instructions on the package, Sayo peels open the first marked section to prepare the self-heating meal. Next, she removes the protective cover over the second step and presses the hidden button beneath it, activating the meal's heating system. After serving everyone's meals, the attendant explains that all that's left to do is wait for the food to finish heating. The group settles into their seats, each holding their bento as they wait. The group waits quietly as steam rises from their self-heating bentos. Suddenly, Isami's stomach lets out a loud growl, making Sayo and Kanoko turn toward him in surprise, while he looks down in embarrassment. Concerned, Sayo asks if something is wrong with him. Flustered, Isami quickly reassures her that he's perfectly fine. Holding her lunchbox with a smile, Kanoko explains that their stomachs always make that sound when they're hungry. Sayo finds the explanation fascinating, calling it a mysterious trait. Kanoko happily agrees, while Isami quietly realizes just how different Sayo's senses are from those of ordinary humans. Kanoko eagerly opens her medium-spicy curry bento. The rich aroma of steaming curry and freshly heated rice immediately makes her smile. Sayo announces that the meals are ready. The group brings their hands together and cheerfully says, "Time to eat." Sayo takes her first bite and is instantly hit by the intense spice. Despite the overwhelming heat, she can't help but admit it's absolutely delicious. Smiling brightly, Kanoko asks Sayo if the food isn't amazing. Beside her, Isami quietly enjoys his own meal. Sayo happily agrees. Curious, Kanoko asks if she can try the mega spicy curry, and Sayo gladly offers her a bite before asking Isami if he'd like some as well. He politely declines. As the meal comes to an end, the train arrives at Sea Road, 42nd Station. An automated announcement welcomes the passengers and thanks them for joining today's tour. The station attendant leads the group along a metal walkway as the tour begins. It explains that humanity was nearly driven to extinction by the Great War while they listen closely. The robot goes on to explain that the war devastated far more than humanity. Countless species were wiped out, leaving lasting scars on the natural world. Continuing the tour, the attendant explains that humanity eventually realized its mistakes. To reduce its impact on nature, people chose to live and raise future generations within isolated cities. The guide explains that visitors can see both relics from the Great War and the ecosystem that has grown around them. The attendant explains that this facility gives ordinary citizens a rare chance to safely observe the world outside the city. The robot says that the tour allows visitors to witness both humanity's past mistakes and nature's remarkable recovery. The attendant introduces the site as the Sea Road of Admonition, a place meant to remind humanity of its past and the consequences of its actions. Standing before a massive glass wall, the trio gazes out at a submerged city reclaimed by marine life. Kanoko clasps her hands to her chest and softly calls the view beautiful. Sayo quietly takes in the breathtaking scenery. Watching the underwater world, she realizes Kanoko was right, it truly is beautiful. As fish glide past the enormous window, the attendant explains that many things found in modern cities were created by imitating objects from before the Great War. Standing beside the massive glass window, the group watches fish drift through the flooded city. The attendant explains that these recreations exist to ensure humanity never forgets that beautiful yet tragic era. The train resumes its journey through the underground tunnels, its wheels clattering steadily along the tracks. Kanoko opens her encyclopedia and wonders what kind of fish they just saw. Isami flips through the pages, pointing to one of the illustrations and asking if that's the species they saw. Watching the siblings, Sayo smiles softly. A quiet realization dawns on our girl. Although countless species vanished during the Great War, some endured, becoming humanity's last living connection to the natural world. Resting her cheek against her hand, Sayo gazes out the window. She realizes that humanity itself is one of the species that managed to survive. As the train races through the darkness, a sobering thought crosses Sayo's mind. That fragile connection to the natural world is now on the verge of disappearing forever. Watching Isami and Kanoko from across the aisle, Sayo realizes they are more than fellow travelers. To her, they represent humanity's last hope. Sayo smiles gently. She reassures herself that, despite everything, humanity's connection to the natural world still remains. The metro train speeds through the endless darkness. As its lights cut through the tunnel, one final thought lingers: this is not the end of humanity. The scene abruptly shifts to a flickering monitor filled with static. A system interface boots up, displaying a message that it is extracting data from a recorded area. The recording pulls up an old development log from Ebikawa Industries, showing an ID card belonging to Nikimuro, employee number 885413. The memory reveals the head librarian in a lab coat working at a computer terminal beside the mechanical frame of a large robot the moment Ethan was created. Nichimuro continues working at the glowing terminal as Ethan's robotic eye slowly comes to life. After a successful breakthrough, the delighted researcher jumps for joy before stepping forward with a warm smile and offering Ethan a handshake. Standing before the completed machine, Nichimuro smiles proudly and shakes Ethan's hand, welcoming the newly created librarian to life. The memory shifts to a group of heavily equipped survivors crossing a massive cracked highway bridge above the ruins of a devastated city. Among them is Ayukawa, who walks down the deserted road wearing a gas mask and carrying a backpack. Without warning, Ayukawa loses his footing and nearly falls from the bridge. At the last second, someone grabs his wrist, pulling him back to safety. The rescuer turns out to be Isami's father. Hidden behind their gas masks, the two exchange a silent glance. The recording reveals this was the beginning of Ayukawa's journey across the bridge with Isami's father, his coding partner, and the other survivors. The final memory shows a crowd gathered inside an underwater observation gallery, quietly watching the gigantic sea creature sleeping beyond the glass. The recording then flickers with static as the system announces the end of the archived footage. After their tour through the ocean tunnel and a ride on the subway, the trio return to the road. Their transport vehicle rumbles through a long underground corridor as they head toward the next city. Seo reflects on how fortunate they were. They managed to stock up on both rations and fuel before leaving. At the wheel, our girl smiles faintly while Ku rests on her shoulder. She says she's grateful the station master told them where they could resupply. Kanoko admits she would love to ride the train again. Seo lets out a quiet laugh and says she feels the same. The vehicle speeds through the dark concrete passage until a bright light appears ahead. She excitedly points out that they've finally reached the exit. Seo looks ahead and notes that the next destination is RE4 in the 21st district. The vehicle rolls through the empty streets of a devastated city. The group reminds themselves that every step brings them closer to finding Usa. Isami quietly studies the ruined city through the windshield. Kanoko stares out and remarks that the place is in terrible condition. Sayo quietly agrees. Abandoned artillery cannons lie scattered among the ruins, wrapped in vines and buried beneath years of debris. After taking in the scene, Sayo concludes that this was likely a defensive line built to halt the executioner's advance. The transport vehicle slows as a massive armored structure comes into view. Isami breaks the silence after spotting it ahead. Sayo studies the enormous structure. She identifies it as a mobile, automated incineration unit. These machines were once built to efficiently dispose of the countless infected corpses during the disaster. Kanoko remarks that this one appears to have completely broken down. Sayo nods after considering Kanoko's observation. She believes the unit was most likely damaged during the intense fighting that took place in the area. A short distance behind them, Isami keeps his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Sayo aims a cable launcher toward a high ledge, and the hook shoots into place. Deciding to take a quick look inside, she prepares to climb, but Isami immediately calls out for her to wait. The cable lifts Sayo to a maintenance opening high above the ground. After reaching the platform, she notices a small hatch built into the metal floor and moves in for a closer inspection. Sayo presses a floor switch with her boot. A sharp electronic beep echoes through the facility as a heavy square hatch swings open. She cautiously peers into the chamber below. The moment Sayo looks inside, her eyes widen in shock. Below her lies a vast chamber filled with countless motionless remains scattered across the concrete floor. After climbing back down, Sayo rejoins the others on the ground. Isami quietly asks if there were people left inside. Sayo softly confirms his suspicion. Isami says he expected as much, recalling that he and Kanoko had seen one of those incineration units when they were children. Sayo lowers her gaze in thought before asking what they did with the bodies back then. Isami calmly answers that they did nothing. There simply wasn't anything they could do. He says they never had the luxury of worrying about the dead. He quietly adds that staying alive had already taken everything they had. After a brief silence, Isami folds his arms and shifts the conversation back to the machine. He asks Sayo if the incineration unit can be repaired. Caught off guard, Sayo stares at him in surprise. She points out that he had just said there was no time to waste on the dead. Isami reflects on everything they've been through together. He tells Sayo that ever since she joined them, she has kept them safe and brought them farther than he ever thought possible. He says it's only right that they return the favor by helping Sayo achieve her own goal. Sayo quietly listens as Isami finishes his thought. He says they'll help her, but only if it's truly what she wants. Isami turns to Kanoko and asks if she's willing to help as well. She beams with a bright smile and happily says she's more than willing. A gentle smile spreads across Sayo's face. Touched by the siblings' kindness, she quietly thanks them. The siblings set off through the sprawling ruins while Sayo explains her plan. If they focus only on restoring the incineration system, she estimates the repairs will take 3 to 4 days. In the meantime, she asks them to find a safe place to stay. The two search the ruined city together, passing the remains of a fallen skeleton. She reminds them not to wander too far because it's dangerous to get separated. She promises to stay close and cheerfully wishes them luck. A rusty door swings open as Isami enters a dark, dust-filled room. Isami dryly comments that the place isn't exactly cozy. After looking around the decaying room, Kanoko remarks that the entire city is falling apart. Isami agrees and decides they should keep searching elsewhere. Among the scattered debris, Isami spots a weathered document on the floor. It turns out to be a hand-drawn map directing anyone seeking refuge to head for the clock tower, claiming salvation awaits there. Isami studies the map with a puzzled expression, quietly repeating the word salvation. Standing beside him, Kanoko curiously asks what a clock tower is. As they peer through the surrounding ruins, a towering stone clock tower rises into view against the bright sky. Isami excitedly announces that he found it, drawing a surprised reaction from Kanoko. Perched atop a concrete ledge, Isami confirms they've found the clock tower but notes that it's still a long way off. He suggests reporting the discovery to Sayo first, and Kanoko happily agrees. Back with Sayo, Isami hands over the map. Sayo repeats the mention of the clock tower, and Isami explains that although every building around it has been destroyed, the tower itself remains untouched. Sayo studies the map. Reading the words salvation lies within, she wonders if the message is referring to a shelter. Isami says the clock tower could hold valuable information. Even if it doesn't, he believes it would at least make a good place to rest. Agreeing with his reasoning, Sayo looks at the siblings and decides they should investigate the clock tower. The trio heads back to their transport vehicle beside a vine-covered concrete structure. As Sayo reaches the door, something suddenly catches her attention. The towering clock tower rises into the sky, its stone walls wrapped in thick vines. It has somehow remained completely untouched, confirming their earlier suspicion. Sayo warns that they have no idea what might be waiting inside and urges everyone to stay cautious. Isami nods in agreement. Our girl stops to inspect the entrance. Thick vines and hanging leaves completely blanket the large arched doorway. Isami studies the overgrown entrance and remarks that no one seems to have set foot here for a very long time. Sayo quietly agrees. Our girl slices through the thick vines blocking the entrance. The old wooden doors slowly creak open, allowing them to step inside. The trio enters a spacious hall with towering ceilings. After looking around, Isami notes that the interior appears to be just as well preserved as the outside. While Isami quietly surveys the room, Sayo pauses to think. She remarks that it doesn't look like there are any survivors here. Just then, Kanoko calls out after noticing something. Kanoko stands before a building map displayed on a nearby counter. Pointing to a heavily marked room, she wonders if there might still be something inside. Isami joins her and studies the map. Reading the label, he identifies the marked location as the main hall. He asks if they should investigate the marked room, and Sayo agrees. With a destination in mind, the trio crosses the vast hall. They arrive at a grand set of double doors at the top of a wide staircase. Sayo confirms they've reached the main hall. Sayo and Isami exchange a tense glance before moving forward. Sayo steps through the doorway first, only to freeze in shock at the sight waiting inside. The enormous chamber is lined with rows of wooden pews filled with countless motionless bodies. They realize the crystallosis infection has completely consumed them. They wonder what kind of place this really is. A sharp mechanical click from above, where a pair of glowing lenses lock onto the unsuspecting trio. From the perspective of a mechanical eye hidden high above, the three travelers stand in the center of the hall, completely unaware they are being watched. The narration questions what the note truly meant by salvation, and what kind of machine is lurking in the darkness. The three travelers stand wide-eyed inside the vast, decorated hall. Rows of motionless figures fill the pews before them. Breaking the heavy silence, Isami quietly asks what this place could possibly be. After taking in the strange layout, he grimly concludes that one thing is certain: this is definitely not a shelter. Sayo inspects the crystal-covered remains, slumped in the seat below. Her eyes widen as she wonders why none of them are carrying protective masks. Kanoko quietly points out that they look as though they were praying. She scans the rows of pews before adding that every victim is facing the same direction, straight toward the inner door. Sayo fixes her gaze on the enormous inner door, unable to shake the thought that salvation might lie beyond it. Meanwhile, Isami walks farther down the central aisle toward the towering structure, wondering if anything is actually waiting behind those doors. Sayo suddenly freezes. Her eye snaps wide open as sweat beads across her face. Our girl looks up and panics, shouting for Isami to get back immediately. Above the massive doors, a pair of glowing lenses suddenly stare down at him. Suddenly, a massive mechanical creature crashes down from the ceiling, slamming into the floor. An heavily armored machine drops into a crouch directly in front of the travelers, cutting off the main path. Without hesitation, Sayo steps in front of the siblings and raises her weapon at the machine. One of the giant unit's weapon attachments shifts into place. the towering machine rises to its full height. It lifts its upper arms overhead without taking its glowing lenses off the intruders. Keeping her eyes on the towering machine, Sayo quietly tells them not to move. Sayo reaches back with one gloved hand and gently guides the siblings away from the danger. She quietly reassures them before telling them to slowly step backward. The machine's weapon remains perfectly still as the group retreats. Sayo realizes that if it truly meant to kill them, it would have fired already. Instead of attacking, the massive machine begins crawling backward up the wall, the machine as it climbs into the high rafters and settles against the upper structure of the hall. Sayo finally lets out a long sigh of relief, closing her eyes as the tension leaves her shoulders. Isami turns to Sayo and sincerely thanks her for saving him. Smiling gently, Sayo tells him not to mention it. Isami then glances up at the damaged rafters and asks what that machine actually is. Sayo lowers her gaze, admitting she has no idea what the machine is. She has never seen an autonomous unit like it before. Kanoko suggests the machine seems to be guarding the door. Sayo shares her conclusion with the siblings. It seems the machine won't attack as long as they stay away from the door, though she cannot be certain. Gripping his tool tightly, Isami suggests they find somewhere other than the clock tower to rest. Isami agrees that leaving the dangerous building is the best idea. The ancient clock mechanism continues to turn, stopping suddenly at 12. A thunderous chime suddenly rings out as the clock strikes 12. Beneath the towering arches, they fall silent, listening. Isami looks up in surprise and asks what is happening. Sayo stays alert as the powerful vibrations continue to ripple through the empty hall. As the final chime fades, she remarks that it was quite a noise. Isami wonders if the clock was simply announcing the time. Before Sayo can answer, a loud mechanical clunk suddenly echoes through the hall. Sayo and Isami stare ahead as the massive inner doors slowly begin to swing open. A sharp metallic click echoes through the hall as the massive doorway fully unlocks. A mechanical hand rests against the body of a violin. Farther inside the dim chamber, a silent figure holds the instrument. The doors swing fully open, revealing a glowing thread of light drifting down from the stage. Kanoko gazes at the grand stage with wide eyes, before quietly realizing that this is what everyone had been praying to. The thought crosses her mind that this is salvation. Sayo wonders whether the infected came here to spend their final moments, or whether this was simply the place they longed to be. In the end, she realizes no one will ever know. At the center of the stage, the towering mechanical figure sits upon its throne, surrounded by smaller android musicians playing stringed instruments and holding mechanical bells. As Sayo takes in the scene, she finds it easy to understand why the victims chose to spend their final moments here before they crystallized. In the end, the gentle music had been soft, quiet, and warm enough to comfort the city's final survivors. The travelers eventually find a room to use as a temporary shelter. Though worn down, it still contains an old wardrobe and the frame of a broken bed. Sayo remarks that, despite the condition of the room, she is glad they finally found somewhere to sleep. Isami quietly agrees while Kanoko sits on the edge of the bed. After a slow blink, she looks toward the siblings and softly calls out to them. Our girl asks the siblings if they would help perform burial rites for everyone in the hall once she finishes repairing the mobile incinerator. She glances, before quietly explaining that, no matter why those people gathered there, they cannot leave them as they are. Isami smiles and assures her they would be happy to help. Sayo heads over to the damaged machine and glances back over her shoulder before getting to work. She crouches down and carefully examines the unit's internal wiring and mechanical components. Isami pushes a heavy utility cart filled with scrap metal and tools through the ruined streets while Kanoko walks beside him carrying a box. Later, the group takes a break outside to eat. Kanoko sleeps peacefully beneath a warm blanket in the dim room. Beside her, Isami sits with his arms crossed against the bed frame, keeping watch until he quietly drifts off to sleep. Meanwhile, Sayo works alone on the damaged machine. As he prepares another body for transport, Isami asks Sayo if this will finally be the last one. Sayo sincerely thanks him for all his help. A series of sharp mechanical buzzes suddenly echoes through the corridor. The massive machine reaches down through an open ceiling hatch, using one of its metal limbs to operate a control panel as tiny electrical sparks flicker around it. Isami watches with quiet amazement as the massive machine carries out maintenance work. Beside her, Sayo realizes that its constant upkeep is the reason both the mechanism and the clock tower have remained in such remarkable condition. Although she has no idea what led it to protect the hall, she cannot shake the feeling that something here is truly worth protecting. The Guardian continues its work. From above, Sayo and Isami push their utility cart out of the hall, politely apologizing for the intrusion before bidding the Guardian farewell. Isami asks if they've decided where to bury the victims, and Sayo answers that they have. Outside on the dirt road, they stand beside the towering mobile incinerator. Looking over the repaired machine, Seo is relieved to see that it can cremate each victim individually. Rows of body bags are carefully laid across the open ground. Seo reflects that, after counting both the victims found inside the incinerator and those discovered in the clock tower, the number was far greater than she expected. She admits that her decision may be selfish and softly apologizes to the siblings. Turning toward the siblings, Seo explains that although they could cremate everyone together, she wants to do everything she can to give each person an individual farewell. Isami looks at Seo with quiet understanding and tells her he understands. He admits the music from the hall has already etched itself into his memory. Kanoko sadly adds that they'll never get to hear it again as a faint trail of smoke drifts past Seo. High above the destroyed city, the mechanical guardian quietly watches from an open doorway. There are always some things worth protecting. A quiet greenhouse basks in the sunlight, overgrown with vines, potted plants, and dense foliage lining wooden shelves beneath a glass roof. A history log explains that when the disaster's miasma first spread across the world, people found many different ways to say goodbye. From within the peaceful greenery, a gentle voice calls out to Henrietta. The girl quietly admits they never imagined their lifelong wish would come true like this. She continues sadly, reflecting that the world has fallen into ruin and that both Papa and Mama are now gone. She reaches out to the greenery and softly apologizes to Henrietta for leaving the remaining responsibilities in her hands. In a quiet final request, she asks Henrietta to take care of everyone. The recording interface displays the girl's final message as the playback reaches its end. Henrietta, the mechanical servant drone, remains motionless inside the facility while the recorded memory fades away. A massive wall of collapsed concrete completely blocks the road ahead, forcing the transport vehicle to stop. From below, Isami calls up to Seo, asking how the route looks and whether they can still get through. Our girl delivers a grim assessment. Even if they somehow cleared the rubble, she explains, the road beyond has completely collapsed. Seo climbs down from the ledge. Isami listens to her report with a resigned expression, concluding that they will have to find another way through. Kanoko glances toward the wreckage as a sharp, rhythmic, whirring sound echoes from behind the collapsed concrete. Kanoko points toward the debris to get Seo and Isami's attention. The three gather around the wreckage to inspect the strange object trapped beneath the collapsed wall. Isami studies it, wondering if it is actually a mechanical leg. Seo examines the trapped machine while the others watch. After a brief inspection, she concludes that it appears to be a small autonomous unit. Kanoko asks whether they can pull the little machine free from the rubble. Isami admits they would probably feel guilty if they left the machine buried there. A faint smile crosses Seo's face. She suggests the unit might know something useful about the surrounding area, and Kanoko immediately insists they should help it. Bracing herself, Seo drives the pry bar beneath the collapsed concrete and lifts with her strength. She calls for Isami to take over. He nods and moves in to pull the trapped machine free. The pry bar sinks deeper beneath the rubble with a heavy clunk. Together they shift the debris aside, exposing the small autonomous unit's white, box-shaped body and its dark camera lens. The small rectangular drone rises onto its thin mechanical legs and gives itself a quick shake, sending dust scattering. Kanoko is relieved to see the little unit is unharmed. Kanoko thanks both Miss Seo and her big brother. A sudden crunch tears through the silence as a deep crack races across the ground. The fractured road suddenly gives way. Seo lunges forward, stretching out her gloved hand and shouting for the others to grab it as Isami and Kanoko plunge over the collapsing edge. Leaning over the edge, Seo strains to keep hold of the group, while Isami shields Kanoko in his arms as they dangle above the abyss. Bracing herself against the unstable ground, Seo realizes the platform beneath her is about to give way. A voice from the past calls to Henrietta, asking her to fill one of the vases with water and bring it over. Henrietta reaches into the cabinet with her slender mechanical arms and carefully selects a tall vase. The gentle voice adds that she should choose whichever design she likes best. Henrietta turns on the faucet and fills the chosen vase with water. As she presents it, the young girl with glasses smiles warmly and thanks her, laughing that she had a feeling Henrietta would pick that one. The young girl carefully arranges a single long-stemmed flower in the decorated vase. As she works, she quietly confesses to Henrietta that she has always been a little jealous of those flowers. She reflects that flowers are quiet yet remarkably resilient, spending their entire lives turning toward the sun. She admits she has long wondered whether, one day, she might be able to join those flowers herself. By a large window, the young girl places the sunflower vase on the ledge beside an armchair and several potted plants. She quietly explains that as long as she remains here, everyone else will be in danger, then asks Henrietta if she understands. Henrietta walks through the bright corridor, passing rows of potted plants. Carrying a small spiky plant in her mechanical hands, she silently goes about her daily routine. A heavy mechanical tremor suddenly breaks the silence. A sharp electronic beep sounds from a communication terminal. An alert appears on the display, reporting that auxiliary unit number 3 is within transmission range and requesting immediate assistance. Henrietta quietly processes the alert before heading down the corridor. She pushes open a heavy wooden door and enters an office, where a tiny mechanical spider scurries across the floor ahead of her. Suspended above a deep chasm, Sayo uses her cable launcher to support the group's weight from the ledge above. The trio lands safely on solid ground. Lowering her cable launcher, Sayo remarks that they came far too close to disaster. Isami lets out a relieved sigh and thanks her for saving them while Kanoko catches her breath. Taking in the devastation, Isami mutters that the place is a complete mess. Sayo agrees, adding that they first need to find a way back to the surface. Kanoko wonders if the little robot survived the fall into the chasm. Isami notices blood running down his sister's leg and quickly points it out. Kanoko looks down in surprise, realizing she has been injured. Sayo kneels beside Kanoko to examine the wound. She explains that the medical kit is still in the transport vehicle, but says they need to stop the bleeding as best they can for now. Nearby, Isami anxiously asks if his sister is all right. The small autonomous unit emerges from behind a concrete slab. Kanoko's face lights up with relief, and she happily tells Sayo that the little robot made it out safely. The four-legged robot steadies itself on the uneven ground. Through its synthesized voice, it politely thanks them for rescuing it. Isami stares at the little machine in astonishment, blurting out that it can talk. The robot confirms that its voice functions are operational thanks to their help. It asks the travelers to wait where they are. It reassures them that help has already been dispatched and will arrive shortly. Sayo echoes the word assistance in surprise. The little robot explains that its parent unit is already on the way. The robot offers to treat Kanoko's injury while they wait. Skeptical, Isami asks if it is really capable of doing that, and the machine calmly replies that it is. The support unit explains that it was built to assist people and is equipped to handle a wide range of situations. Kanoko turns to Sayo with a bright smile. Sayo says they would gladly accept the support unit's help. The support drone extends a thin medical nozzle and sprays a treatment over Kanoko's wound. Sitting on a concrete block, Kanoko gratefully thanks the machine. It confirms the procedure is complete and says the bleeding should stop for now. A dull clunk suddenly echoes nearby as Sayo looks on. A towering mechanical figure descends into the canyon, casting a broad shadow over the group. As it lands, it asks for permission to introduce itself once more. It introduces itself as Henrietta, a servant who works at a nearby manor. Isami stares up, quietly struck by its immense size. Gesturing toward the small drone, Henrietta explains that it is her auxiliary unit. Henrietta explains that she had assigned the auxiliary unit to patrol and survey the surrounding area. When it suddenly went out of transmission range, she could no longer monitor its status. She explains that auxiliary units normally find their own way home after losing contact, but this one became trapped beneath the rubble until the travelers came to its rescue. Henrietta continues. Thanks to the restored transmission, she was able to trace the data sent by the auxiliary unit and locate them without difficulty. She bows once more, sincerely thanking the group for helping her auxiliary unit. Embarrassed by the praise, Sayo waves it off, insisting it was nothing. Henrietta studies the group before admitting that meeting living humans has become exceedingly rare in this era. She then asks what has brought the three of them to these ruins. Sayo explains that they are trying to reach 2-4. With the main road completely blocked, they ended up stranded at the bottom of the canyon. She goes on to explain that they were searching for another route when they came across the auxiliary unit. Henrietta quietly acknowledges the explanation. The robot then reveals that the only other living person she has encountered since the disaster was also searching for TO4. The revelation leaves Isami frozen in shock. Sayo immediately asks for the person's name. Henrietta calmly answers that it was a man named Usa, catching the group completely by surprise. The name hits Isami like a bolt of lightning. He desperately begs Henrietta to tell them everything she knows about Usa, insisting that any information would help. Henrietta replies that she is willing to share everything she knows. After a brief pause, however, she adds that there is one condition. Henrietta explains that she would like to finish treating Kanoko's injury first. With a soft click, the auxiliary unit reconnects to the cable beneath her frame. Henrietta then invites the travelers to accompany her back to the manor. The group follows Henrietta through the narrow canyon until a grand stone manor built into the cliffside comes into view. Leading them up a broad staircase, she announces that they have arrived. Henrietta opens the door, marked with the number 7, and politely invites the travelers inside. Sayo thanks her before they step through the entrance. Beyond the doorway, dense tropical plants fill the manor's interior. Kanoko gazes around in awe, softly marveling at the beautiful conservatory. Kanoko sits comfortably in a chair with a small case resting on her lap. Fresh white bandages are wrapped securely around her lower leg, showing that her treatment is complete. As the robot packs away her medical supplies, she explains that the medicine she applied is especially effective for wounds and should help the injury heal quickly. With a bright smile, Kanoko thanks Henrietta for treating her injury. The robot returns to the reason they came. She asks if they are looking for information about Usa, and Isami adds that any detail, no matter how small, would be valuable. Henrietta prepares to recount what she knows. She cautions them that the information is limited, but promises to explain everything she recorded. She explains that Usa arrived at the manor 1,172 days ago. Like the 3 travelers, he had been stranded after the main road collapsed and came across the manor while searching for another route. She goes on to explain that she directed Usa to a detour around the collapsed roadway. Based on her records, she believes he successfully continued toward the next city afterward. Henrietta describes the route. She offers to guide them along the same detour later, earning a grateful thank you from Sayo. According to Henrietta's records, Usa planned to stop at a nearby factory that manufactures industrial units to replenish his supplies before continuing his journey. Sayo considers the mention of the factory. Isami reasons that if they can reach it, it is well worth investigating, and Isami quietly agrees. Henrietta finishes her account. She apologizes that this is all the information she has and admits she is unsure how useful it will be. Isami reassures Henrietta that her information was more than enough. Knowing that Usa was still alive 3 years ago gives them renewed hope. Sayo then asks about the request Henrietta wanted to make. Henrietta says the explanation begins much earlier and asks them to hear the story from the beginning. Turning toward a nearby door, Henrietta asks the group to follow her. Henrietta leads the travelers through a long metallic corridor. When they reach a large automatic door, it slides open, and she steps aside to invite them in. Beyond the doorway lies an enormous greenhouse filled with towering sunflowers. Surrounded by the towering flowers, Sayo and Isami look up in quiet admiration. Smiling brightly, Kanoko reaches toward one of the petals. She excitedly recalls seeing these flowers in an encyclopedia and identifies them as sunflowers. Henrietta warmly confirms that she is correct. The robot explains that long ago, humans lived alongside countless forms of life, and plants played an important role in everyday life. She explains that the master of the house and his wife were botanists who devoted their lives to studying plants, and that they lived here with their only daughter. She goes on to explain that the young mistress suffered from an illness that kept her confined to the manor. Henrietta was brought there to assist her with daily life. When the global disaster struck, the master and his wife were away on a business trip. They were caught in the catastrophe and never returned home. Henrietta explains that the young mistress was left completely alone. She then reveals that the favor she wishes to ask of the travelers concerns the girl herself. Henrietta recounts that the young mistress eventually believed she had found a way to overcome both the disaster and her illness. The revelation makes Kanoko gasp in surprise. Trying to make sense of the story, Sayo asks if the young mistress is somehow still alive. Henrietta quietly replies that if the young mistress's words were true, then the answer is far more unusual than they might expect. She turns slightly away from the travelers before revealing the truth. Every flower blooming throughout this room, she says, could be considered the young mistress herself. The girl holds up a small white toy pig and turns to Henrietta with a question, asking whether the mechanical servant knows a certain fact. She asks Henrietta if she understands how the natural world works. Her fingers rest lightly on the toy pig and a small toy wolf. She explains that animals feed on plants, while other animals eventually prey upon them in turn. She continues by explaining that when living things die, they return to the soil, allowing new plants to grow from it. Although people believe the world died long ago, the young mistress is convinced these animals are far stronger than humans and have continued the cycle beyond the city's walls. Turning slightly, the young mistress recalls her father's words. He told her that observations of the outside world are still being conducted, though ordinary people must obey strict regulations and can only glimpse it from designated observation sites. She quietly wonders what the land outside the city looks like without people and wishes she could leave the manor one day. A teapot, several cups, and small containers sit neatly arranged on a low table. Henrietta then tells the travelers that, from a biological standpoint, the young mistress is no longer alive. Sayo asks whether crystallosis claimed the young mistress's life, but Henrietta firmly replies that it did not. The robot reveals the tragic truth. The young mistress chose to end her own life of her own free will. In a quiet voice, Kanako murmurs that the story is incredibly sad. She asks if the young mistress took her own life because she feared the suffering crystallosis would bring. Henrietta gently corrects her, saying that is not quite the reason. She explains that while the young mistress did fear crystallosis, what truly frightened her was being cremated after death. Isami asks if what truly terrified the young mistress was not death itself, but being cremated afterward. The robot confirms that he has understood correctly. Henrietta explains that the young mistress had been born with a frail body, leaving her constantly aware that death was never far away. Unable to leave the manor, the young mistress came to treasure them as companions that stayed by her side through each quiet day. Henrietta explains that the young mistress's parents repeatedly renovated the manor, transforming it into an environment where both their daughter and the plants she loved could thrive. She explains that this was the young mistress's favorite room because it was filled with the sunflowers she loved most. Smiling warmly, Kanako tells Henrietta that she completely understands why, calling it a wonderful room. Henrietta says the young mistress would have been happy to hear those words. She explains that the young mistress loved flowers with all her heart, admiring them and longing to become like them. That deep bond ultimately led her to make her decision. At the moment of her death, the young mistress wished for everything she was to return to the soil. Turning to Henrietta, our girl asks if returning to the soil is meant literally, and she confirms that it is. Henrietta explains the family's philosophy. When living things die, they return to the soil, nourish new plants, and continue the cycle of life. To them, that was simply the natural order of the world. She explains that in modern society, where people spend their entire lives inside cities, this way of thinking has become unfamiliar. To the young mistress, however, it meant everything. Henrietta reflects on nature's endless cycle, where every flower eventually blooms, withers, and gives way to new life. Her skeletal mechanical hand carefully removes a seed from the center of a dried sunflower. From those withered blooms come new seeds, and once planted, they sprout into fresh flowers. The robot explains that the young mistress wished to become part of that natural cycle and remain with the plants she loved. As Henrietta's words sink in, Sayo and Isami realize the truth. If the young mistress had been cremated, nothing would have returned to the soil, and her final wish could never have been fulfilled. She explains that special measures had been prepared only in case an unexpected tragedy claimed the young mistress's life. However, after the world fell into disaster, she was left with no choice but to carry out those measures herself. By following the arrangements made while the young mistress was still alive, her remains were returned to the soil and became compost for the very flowers blooming in this room. Henrietta quietly states that she can no longer detect any sign that the young mistress is physically alive. Henrietta says she wants to believe the young mistress's wish was fulfilled, even if only in some small way. After apologizing for the lengthy explanation, the robot opens a small compartment in her chest and reveals its contents to the travelers. Henrietta finally explains her request. All she needs is for the travelers to take some soil and a handful of seeds. The young mistress spent nearly her entire life confined to the manor, leaving her with a deep longing for the world beyond, not just outside the estate, but beyond the city itself. The robot admits she cannot show the young mistress the world beyond the city. Even so, she hopes to at least let her see the world beyond the manor. Henrietta explains that her primary duty is to care for them, preventing her from ever leaving the manor for long. Facing the travelers, the robot makes her request. If they ever discover a place that feels right during their journey, would they plant these seeds there for the young mistress? Above all else, this is the one favor she wishes to ask of them. Sayo reaches down to pick up the small rectangular container from the table. With a gentle smile, Sayo readily accepts the request and reassures Henrietta. Our girl explains that they cannot make any promises, but they will do everything they can to honor both Henrietta's wishes and those of the young mistress. She sincerely thanks the travelers. Henrietta reflects that the young mistress's dream can now reach beyond the manor's walls in another way. The robot places a small data chip into Sayo's gloved hand. It contains selected video recordings of Usa, along with local maps and a safe detour route to guide the travelers back to the main road. At the manor's entrance, Henrietta bids the group farewell. She warns that while the data will lead them back to the main road, she has no information about what lies beyond it and asks them to travel carefully. The robot offers one final farewell. Smiling warmly, Sayo wishes her well and tells her to take care. At the bottom, they look back one last time before continuing their journey. The group returns to their vehicle parked among the city's ruins. Standing beside the driver's door, Isami stares off in thought, prompting Sayo to lean out the passenger window and ask what's on his mind. Isami opens up to Sayo. Before meeting her, He had spent his entire life focused only on survival, believing that was simply how everyone had to live in such a harsh world. As Sayo looks back, Isami climbs into the vehicle and shuts the door behind him. He reflects that people can see the world in very different ways, and that some choose to live for something beyond mere survival. A framed photograph inside the vehicle shows Sayo standing beside the older traveler, Tomine. Quietly reflecting on Isami's words, she admits to herself that he is right. Staring ahead, our girl admits she no longer knows which path is truly the right one. She reaches a quiet conclusion. No matter the choice, seeing it through demands the same unwavering resolve. The vehicle rolls along a highway buried beneath towering ruins. Kanoko recalls Henrietta's belief that living things should return to the soil, then remembers the station attendant calling the place where the ocean can be seen an especially important destination. Holding her book close, she quietly wonders what the world beyond the city is like now. Gazing through the small side window, Kanoko wonders if she'll ever get the chance to see that world with her own eyes. The story shifts to a memory. Looking up in amazement, the young girl introduces herself to Henrietta and marvels at just how enormous the mechanical servant is. She looks up through her round glasses and asks Henrietta which one she likes best. After a brief pause, the robot quietly says this one is probably her favorite. The girl beams with delight as she happily tells Henrietta that it is her favorite too. The robot admires its soft orange petals and quietly remarks on their beautiful color. She says its warm orange color matches her hair perfectly. A cheerful laugh escapes her as she hugs the sunflower. Convinced they're a perfect match, she happily declares that the two of them are going to get along wonderfully. Looking up at Henrietta, the girl remarks on how large her hands are and politely asks if she may touch them. Henrietta immediately agrees. Closing her eyes, she smiles as she listens to the quiet sounds of the machinery moving inside. The girl admits she expected androids to feel cold and frightening. Instead, she is surprised to find Henrietta warmer than she is. The memory lingers as the young mistress smiles brightly, still holding Henrietta's hand. She says she's truly looking forward to spending time together. Beside a lone sunflower, Henrietta's mechanical hand quietly preserves the memory of their very first meeting. She reflects that neither of their feelings has changed since the day they first met, and believes that as long as the cycle of nature endures, they will always remain together. A massive concrete building lies in ruins. Whatever dangers may still lurk inside remain impossible to predict. Isami surveys the wreckage and notes with cautious relief that none of the executioners seem to be nearby. Even so, Isami reminds himself not to let his guard down. The situation is better than he ever expected, but that does not mean it is safe. From the driver's seat of the transport vehicle, Sayo asks Kanoko to pass her the green number 22 plug. After checking the label, Kanoko holds it up and asks if it is the right one. Sayo takes the cable from Kanoko's hand and thanks her, confirming that it is exactly the plug she needs. Kanoko asks if there is anything else she can do to help. Sayo glances back and requests the red number 34 plug instead. Kanoko hands over the bundle of wires after making sure she has the correct one. Sayo accepts it with a grateful nod. After a brief pause, Kanoko asks if there is anything else left to do. Sayo looks up at her, giving the question a moment's thought. Our girl reassures Kanoko that everything is in order and that they have finished all the work for now. Sayo tells Kanoko she is about to take the vehicle on a trial run. Warning her not to stand too close, she asks the young girl to step back a little, and Kanoko nods in acknowledgement. Inside the driver's cabin, Sayo plugs a cable into the console. She tells Ku to begin, and the small companion leans forward as the system hums to life. Energy crackles around Ku as the mechanism powers up. The towering work machine finishes unfolding, planting its thick legs firmly amid the ruined city. From a distance, Isami asks how the trial run is going, and whether the machine is ready to use. Sayo confirms that her adjustments are complete, and that everything should be working properly. Isami is delighted by the news. As Isami rejoins the group, Sayo steps forward. Curious about the scouting trip, she asks how it went. Isami reports that he found no signs of movement, including any monsters. Concluding they are not in immediate danger, he reassures the group, and Sayo smiles with relief, saying they can finally relax a little. Sayo turns the conversation back to their objective, asking when they should begin clearing the rubble. Our girl points out that the sun is already beginning to set and suggests waiting until tomorrow to start. She estimates the work robot can clear the path in about 2 days, and Isami agrees that the plan makes sense. Isami admits he is getting tired of seeing nothing but rubble everywhere. Looking over the ruined landscape, Sayo agrees that the destruction here is far worse than in the last city they visited. As he studies the devastated landscape, Isami quietly hopes the road to the next city is still intact. Sayo shares the same hope. She tells the siblings it is time to rest. For now, she says, their only priority is to keep moving forward one step at a time. The group heads toward the back of their parked transport vehicle to set up camp. Walking beside Sayo, Isami asks if he can ask her something. Isami explains that there is something he has been wondering about. Sayo looks at him and asks what it is. Isami explains that even before meeting Sayo, he had noticed the executioners appearing less and less often, and lately they have gone several days without encountering a single one. He adds that they have never gone this long without seeing an executioner before. Isami realizes the last executioner they faced attacked them on the very day they met Sayo. It already feels like a distant memory. Sayo suggests the executioner's presence may simply vary from place to place, or perhaps for reasons they cannot understand. As the group climbs a concrete staircase, Isami replies that whatever the cause, he is grateful they have not had to deal with any lately. Sayo points out that they still know very little about the executioners, and Isami agrees, warning that they cannot assume the danger is gone. As always, they will have to stay vigilant as they press onward. The group arrives at a reinforced shelter. Sayo announces that this will be their resting place for the day. Looking over the entrance back, Isami points out that it is quite a walk from the transport vehicle and asks why she chose this location. Our girl explains that this facility suffered far less damage than the surrounding buildings. Better still, its internal systems are still functioning. Sayo adds that she found something interesting while exploring the facility earlier. Night falls over the ruined city beneath a thin crescent moon. Inside the shelter, Sayo and Kanoko sit in armchairs with towels draped over their shoulders, quietly enjoying a peaceful moment. Leaning back with a satisfied smile, Kanoko remarks on how wonderfully warm the bath was. Sayo says cleaning the old bathtub took some effort, but it was well worth it. A proper hot bath, she notes, feels nothing like simply wiping yourself clean. Kanoko suddenly notices her older brother humming. Sayo realizes it's the melody from the clock tower, and he is surprisingly good. Kanako never heard him hum before. Seeing Kanoko lost in thought, Sayo asks what is on her mind. Looking up, Kanoko quietly says she thinks being with Sayo and Ku has finally allowed her brother to feel safe enough to relax. Elsewhere in the tiled bath, Isami soaks in the hot water while Ku floats peacefully beside him. She reflects that when it was only the two siblings, they never knew when an executioner might strike, making a peaceful bath like this seem impossible. Kanoko admits that she feels like she is always relying on everyone else. At best, she says, all she can do is help a little. Stepping closer, Sayo gently tells her that she is completely wrong. She confesses that her sensing ability is weaker than Isami's and that she is not strong enough to be much help. She wishes there were something more she could do for everyone. As Sayo listens, she recalls Kanoko eagerly helping during the repairs earlier and realizes what has been weighing on the young girl's mind. Sayo worries that she may have said something that hurt her feelings without meaning to. After a moment of thought, Sayo smiles warmly and tells Kanoko she has an idea. Our girl leans in and whispers her idea into Kanoko's ear. Looking up with excitement, Kanoko asks if Sayo really means it. Sayo smiles and assures her they will ask Isami as soon as he returns. A freshly bathed Isami stretches as he leaves the bathroom with a towel over his shoulder. Back in the main room, Kanoko greets him with a bright smile, happily pointing out that he is finally finished, and Isami answers with a simple nod. Isami looks towards Sayo and asks if everything has been all right. Our girl assures him that everything is fine. With a bright smile, Kanoko eagerly shows Ku her sketchbook across the low table. She proudly reveals the drawing she made of him and asks what he thinks, earning an excited response from the little companion. Isami remarks that his little sister seems to be in an unusually good mood and asks if something happened while he was away. From her seat, Sayo chuckles and confirms that something wonderful did. Sayo looks at Isami and Ku before announcing that she has a proposal for them. The scene shifts to outside. The group gathers behind the transport vehicle as Kanoko settles into the driver's seat. An electronic chime signals that the system is fully online. Holding the control interface, Kanoko starts the training software. The display announces the beginning of the beginner operation program and instructs her to follow the steps to learn the basics of operating the machine. Isami watches his little sister with concern, reminding her not to overdo it. Smiling confidently, Kanoko promises she will take it one step at a time and do her best. Sayo asks Ku to help Kanoko through the training, and the little companion chirps eagerly in agreement. The work vehicle's hatch closes as Sayo gets down. Still looking uneasy, Isami asks Sayo if Kanoko will really be all right inside. Our girl reassures him that she will. Inside the cockpit, Kanoko settles confidently at the controls while Ku stands beside the interface. Sayo explains that when it comes to operating machinery, Ku is actually more capable than she is. Sayo explains that the skills Kanoko learns here will undoubtedly help her in the future. Outside the vehicle, Isami calmly admits that Sayo is right. The towering four-legged work robot lumbers forward through the ruined city. As he watches it move, Isami realizes his little sister will not stay a child forever. Their destination may still be far away, but little by little, this journey is helping all three of them move forward.